This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome once again from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, is Eben Jansen. This show is always live. It's broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park in Johannesburg. And now don't forget, between 9 and 12, we're also live on YouTube on our streaming facility there. You can watch us back on demand any time of the day. Now, question of the day today, we ask you, can the latest round of student protests be justified? You've seen overnight artworks being burnt in Cape Town, public transport being set alight on the university campuses. It's all getting a little bit out of hand. We'll try and deal with it as best as we can throughout the 3 hours of the show today. Also, there are other matters in the news, of course, Sona debates going on, but let's get the latest from our president.
Overnight clashes between police and students at the University of Cape Town gets out of hand. The debate on President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address continues today. And the current United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has praised his late Egyptian predecessor, Boutros Ghali. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you.
Thanks, Elvis. Good morning to you, and good morning to you at home as well. We start off with sports from on-field today.
Ibrahimovic.
The UEFA Champions League, Edinson Cavani comes off the PSG bench to score the winner against Chelsea.
Does get there and scores! A sensational substitution for Paris Saint-Germain.
It was an out-of-court settlement. This is
Chippa United chairman Chippa Mpengesi clears the air around Rogers Kakani's court case. All this as Kenya's athletics head takes special leave as an investigation gets underway into claims that he solicited bribes from athletes who failed drugs tests. That's what we have for you in the sport at 10:20 or so. Be sure to stick around for that. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. Police and students clashed at the University of Cape Town last night. Police fired rubber bullets and stun grenades to disperse a crowd and a group of students on the main campus. They were called in to help a private company demolish a shack that was erected by supporters of the Roads Must Fall movement. One person was arrested.
Scenes at the UCT lower campus. A jammy shuttle was set alight, including a car parked at the institution. Students also destroyed artwork from one of the buildings. Police say they were forced to take action when the protest turned violent.
The only reason I'm emotional is that this is what we have to do to get management to listen to us. If it means signing a paper to ensure insourcing or ensuring that students aren't homeless, this is what we have to do.
Police visited the university to tear down a shack erected by students after they failed to meet a 5 p.m. deadline to remove it. Attempts to form a human chain to prevent its dismantling unsuccessful. Protesters have complained about the lack of accommodation for black students. UCT management has condemned the protests. The institution's Elijah Molola says they will take steps against those responsible for the damage of its property. Police have opened cases of housebreaking and malicious damage to property. Vanessa Puna, SABC News, UCT, Cape Town.
Still on the UCT story, the university management says there's 8 arrested now have been suspended. They will appear in the Wynberg Magistrates Court for charges of public violence and malicious damage to property. For more on the story, we're now joined by the university spokesperson Elijah Molola on the line. A very good morning to you, Elijah, and welcome. Elijah, can you hear me? Well, it seems like we're still trying to connect to Elijah and see. Elijah, can you hear me now? Well, it looks like we cannot connect to Elijah now. We'll see if we can get back to him on that particular story to find out what is the latest on the campus as we speak and the situation there. Now, the debate on the Zuma State of the Nation address continues today. The economy took center stage yesterday with opposition parties weighing in on current issues.
Parties used their time to shred the government's plan of action as outlined by President Zuma.
We cannot respect a man personally responsible for the building of Nkandla and the firing of Nhlanhla.
What kind of a self-respecting country fails to produce food for itself despite the availability of arable land? More than 10 million workers who wake up every day to sell their labor. They do not get any living wage.
For the UDM, a request for the president to do the right thing.
Give us a mandate, Msholos, to handle your exit in a dignified manner. Further, and to avoid another embarrassing sitting president scoring own goals.
Focusing on the sluggish economy, the ruling party says it's committed to providing incentives to attract investments in various industries, and the implementation of the 9-point plan and industrialization policy will go full steam ahead.
I'm happy to indicate that we already have pledges of over 30 billion rand from institutions like the Land Bank, the Industrial Development Corporation.
I remember that even when I sat in cabinet some 10 years ago, we were constantly being asked to bail out the South African Airways. Why are we still doing it? Too often it comes down to poor policy decisions.
He made a serious error when he appointed Van Rooyen as a Minister of Finance to appease the Guptas, and in doing so, wiped out almost 700 billion rand of wealth in South Africa. The president remained silent.
Bulelani Philip, SABC News, Parliament.
It is day 2, and political parties in Parliament will again this afternoon debate President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address. As you know, it is the second day during which the parties can give their take on how they see the state of the nation. President Zuma is expected to reply tomorrow. Now, for the latest, we are joined by our SABC reporter in Parliament, Manalisi Dubasa. Manalisi, very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, Elvis.
Now, it was a fierce start to the Sona debate yesterday. Can you recap for us what transpired yesterday?
Well, Elvis, look, this is what has become our new normal now in Parliament. And you must remember that this year is going to be even worse because we're in an election year. There are certain scenarios here which I would say that is the first salvos moving towards those elections later this year. As we could have heard the narrative of the ruling party, they are saying that, yes, we're in a very difficult position. We're in a very depressed economic situation. But not everything bad about this economy depend on us. I mean, we have the global commodity prices weakening. We have the global economy as a whole, I mean, not in a very good state of affairs. But those things that we can do ourselves, we can do it. We are cutting wasteful expenditure. We are dealing harshly with corruption. But on the other side, you have opposition parties. The DA's position is such that they want to put a narrative that they are dealing here with a president which is out of touch with the realities of ordinary people. As you could have heard my money talking about Planet Zuma. That is the theme I'm sure they will be taking right through this electioneering year. And you have the EFF on the one hand that portrays itself as the true representative of the poor and the working class. They've been saying that throughout. But what they are also trying to do now is to try to say that President Zuma, following this court case last week, is that now he has literally become an illegitimate president. And on the other side, we have other parties in between. For instance, the IFP, that says that, look, the State of the Nation address was pretty good to a certain extent, but that was too little, too late. There's a lot of damage that has already been done. So, you know, you are going to have those narratives moving on up to the election in August, unfortunately.
Now, it is day 2. Can we expect the same narrative to continue today, or do you think that the opposition parties will stick to the script in debating the State of the Nation address?
No, absolutely, Elvis. What they are going to do, they will break it down. I mean, it's all about the economy. But if you could have heard some of the DA MPs moving it even to education, that there was nothing mentioned in education. I mean, we all agree that if we need this economy to grow, we need the workforce that is skillful. I mean, we are living in a technological era, and we will need those skills. And they say that the president said, and indeed, he said nothing about basic education is the State of the Nation address. Understandably so, because the priority now is the economy. I mean, we are facing downgrades. I mean, we are facing a whole lot of, unemployment is spiraling out of control. So the president had to emphasize those issues. But you will have opposition parties nitpicking now what the president couldn't do in the State of the Nation. And unfortunately, he couldn't say everything in a speech. Otherwise, we would have been here the whole night.
Manalisi Dubase, tomorrow is the report back from the president after the debates today. Anything extraordinary that we might expect, if you look into your crystal ball this morning, that we might expect from the president?
Well, Elvis, I think he will try to be very balanced. He will try to be very diplomatic. What I don't expect is, him going through those theatrical things that sometime last year he tried to do, like Nkandla, those kind of things. I think he will be more diplomatic now when he will try to address some of the issues that were raised, because there were valid issues that these opposition parties raised yesterday. I'm sure the president would try to address those honestly, and he will try also, to put sort of some indicators about what we are going to hear in the budget speech, which follows only next week on Wednesday.
Manalisi Dubase, thank you so much for that report. That was our SABC reporter in Parliament, Manalisi Dubase. Right now, we continue with a great theme today, and we're asking you a question. We'll come back to the theme, but we're asking you a very important question today. You've seen what happened at the UCT yesterday, students burning down taking down some of the artwork and burning them in the street. They also erected a shack. And the question that we pose to you today, can the latest round of student protest in the country be justified? We'd like to get your thoughts on the Facebook page as well as on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. But right now, we got a theme for you today, looking at the drought situation as well as hunger in the SADC region as well as on the continent and worldwide, and be crossing over to Eben.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elvis. Now, I can tell you that the World Food Programme has raised concerns about food security in southern Africa, where they say an estimated 14 million people are facing hunger following prolonged dry spells that led to a poor harvest the last year. The weather conditions is said to have been worsened by El Niño, a pattern which typically brings drier conditions to southern Africa and wetter ones to the eastern parts of the continent.
South Africa faces its worst drought in decades after 2015 was the driest calendar year since records began in 1904. The drought was hit by much of the region, including the maize belt in South Africa, the continent's most advanced economy and the top producer of the staple grain. Expectations of a dire crop this season could force the country to import up to 6 million tons of maize, over half of its consumption needs.
They warn that southern Africa is currently in the grip of an intense drought that has expanded and strengthened, driven one of the strongest El Niño events in the last 50 years. Across large swaths of Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, South Africa, Mozambique, Botswana, and Madagascar, the current rainfall has so far been the driest in the last 35 years. While it is too early to provide detailed estimates of the population likely to be food insecure in 2016 and 17, it is expected that the population in need of emergency food assistance and livelihood recovery support will increase significantly.
In countries such as Malawi, much of the maize crop is produced by small-scale farmers, often just to feed their own families. The vast majority are utterly dependent on rainfall as they cannot afford irrigation systems. The Farm Input Subsidy Program was launched in 2005, but economists in Malawi say it is not enough.
The subsidy can only succeed if there is sufficient rain, not too much, not too little. Fertilizers will do nothing if the soil is dry. So there must be good water in soil. If there are no rains, at least water should come from irrigation. So when you talk about subsidy thing, you must look at the question, when there's no rain, what do we do? The answer is irrigation.
The World Food Programme is looking to scale up its food and cash-based assistance programs in the worst-hit countries, but faces critical funding challenges. The worst affected country in the region is Malawi, where 2.8 million people, 16% of the population, are expected to go hungry, followed by the Indian Ocean island of Madagascar, where almost 1.9 million are at risk. In Zimbabwe, 1.5 million people, more than 10% of the population, face hunger.
This season is really bad, as we can want to compare with the previous year, like last year. Last year we managed to receive some rains, whereby our communities managed to plant something in the ground. But this year it's a bad year.
The drought has been worsened by an exceptionally strong El Nino weather pattern, a warming of ocean surface temperatures in the eastern and central Pacific that occurs every few years with ripple effects around the globe. El Nino events typically bring dry conditions to southern Africa and wetter ones to East Africa. In Ethiopia alone, 435,000 children will require treatment for severe acute malnutrition, and the number of people in need of food assistance is expected to increase from over 10 million currently to 18 million by the end of 2016. The situation is likely to get worse before it improves. Families face multiple challenges as they enter their second failed harvest, with much of the livestock lost, food reserves depleted, and access to water severely curtailed. The situation is aggravated by rising food prices, forcing many vulnerable households to skip meals and sell off assets. The dry, hot conditions are expected to persist until the start of the Southern Hemisphere autumn in April or May.
Now, for more on the food crisis in Zimbabwe and the rest of Southern Africa, there's also, of course, the plea for aid to international donors. Now, we're joined from our Pretoria studio this morning by Zimbabwe's High Commissioner to South Africa, Mr. Isaac Moyo. A very good morning to you, Mr. Moyo. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Good morning.
Mr. Moyo, if I can ask you to paint us a picture of the severity of the drought in Zimbabwe, which are the areas worst affected, and then the impact it's having on what is now known as the food crisis in Southern Africa and Zimbabwe.
Well, we do indeed have a humanitarian situation that has arisen in Zimbabwe because of the El Nino-induced drought situation. There has been almost total crop failure in the country. In fact, the larger parts of the country have not received their normal rainfall at all. The most affected areas are, of course, our regions that normally get low rainfall. These are the southern regions of Masvingo, the Matabeleland provinces, parts of the Midlands province, but even our regions that normally get good rainfall have also not received the normal rainfall this rain season. Therefore, the impact spreads right across the country. It is affecting the food security of the people. It is affecting educational establishments because water is not easily available. Health institutions are affected. Wildlife is affected badly because boreholes are drying in some of the areas, and there would be a need to translocate some of the animals. The impact is indeed horrific, and I think this explains why the government of Zimbabwe on the 4th of February this year declared a state of disaster.
Now, tell us about what you would need to get through this tough patch. I understand you've asked for 420,000 metric tons of grains in food aid to face those, or to feed those facing hunger this year. Is that accurate? Can you give us a bit more detail, maybe?
Yes. Yes, we have definitely appealed to the international community and other donor partners to come to our assistance, particularly because of the scale of the disaster. We need food for people to eat. We need food for young children, nutrients for young children, particularly the children aged under 5. And of course, as I've indicated, it is also wildlife that is affected. So apart from food, grain, and every type of food that our communities can consume, that we require, and of course the logistic capacity to deliver that food to the people, we have also asked for support in terms of undertaking some of the measures that will sustain this response. We need to be able to revive some of the boreholes in the dry areas because some of them are not working. We need to drill new boreholes. And of course, we really need to have agriculture, the agriculture sustaining mechanisms put in place. These are some of the things that we have asked for. And the Zimbabwe government has also established a special cabinet committee which is supported by a technical structure of public officials, the private sector and the donor partners that to assist in the mobilization of these resources.
What's the response from the international community at the moment to your pleas for assistance? Are you getting assistance?
Well, so far the United Nations had pledged US $60 million to this effort. They did when at the first instance we thought only 1.5 million people were going to require food assistance. But much later, after an assessment, it has turned out that we have almost 3 million people that require food assistance, and this is 30% of our population. And apart from what the United Nations has already provided and indications by them that they are considering our requests in the light of the new circumstances, we have also had indications from some of the BRICS countries that they are going to be coming in with some assistance once we have indicated our specific needs. We have had those indications from Brazil, from China, among other countries, and we have also been promised $5 million by the United States government so far, and of course we continue to appeal to the broader international community to render whatever assistance they can so that these can support the efforts that the Zimbabwe government has been undertaking on their own or importing food to cover these deficits.
I wanted to ask you about the reinstatement of duties on basic commodities such as cooking oil and maize, which had been lifted a couple of years ago to encourage imports. Do you think this might adversely affect the price and availability of food in Zimbabwe?
Well, we had reintroduced those duties as part of our government's broad fiscal measures to support our industry. At that time, there were indications that our industry was regaining some capacity to deal with those matters and to protect that development and encourage the development and the growth of that industry. Those measures had been introduced. Obviously, the measures had nothing to do with the new situation which has arisen, and since they were just there to try and assist the revival of our industry, which had been struggling with certain capacity issues since they could not easily raise capital from the market, and that was why those measures were adopted. But of course, a new situation has now arisen, and I have no doubt that the Zimbabwe government will continue to review the situation and take the interests best suited to our needs at particular times.
Your Excellency, I thank you for joining us today. That's the High Commissioner of Zimbabwe here in South Africa, Mr. Isaac Moyo, talking about the escalating food crisis and, of course, the ongoing drought, not just in Zimbabwe, but in Southern Africa. We'll continue that conversation after the break, but let's have a look at some of the other news items today. Now, of course, you saw our top story a little bit earlier. A number of University of Cape Town students are now facing criminal charges and suspension from the university following last night's clashes. You see the pictures there. We were taught to student protesters under the Rhodes Must Fall banner reacted violently to the institution's request to remove their protest shack. Now, earlier this week, students erected shacks on campus grounds to highlight the lack of accommodation for black students. Now, we have the number at 8 arrests have been made overnight. We'll keep that. We'll try and find out. Of course, they're due to appear in the Wynberg Magistrates Court a little bit later today. But let's have a look at some of the comments that students and others are putting forward. Now, Mamokheti Molopiane says, I really appreciate and I'm in awe of the younger generation. Fees must fall, roads must fall, Shackville leading the way. Don't burn the paintings though. Makone says, people like quoting Mandela's Rivonia trial message of dying for what he believes in. But do they comprehend what he meant? Shackville. Then Jackie the Poet. One more time, I support the student movement and Shackville 100%. Name cannot be blank. UCT only has themselves to blame for this, he says, or she says. If they'd listened to the students' pleas, none of this would have happened. There you have the Shackville movement, the Rhodes Must Fall movement. That's a picture from UCT. There's even a Portaloo there, as you can see. So they're well organized, the movement is. Now, of course, our question of the day deals directly with this and other protests that we see around the country turning violent. Here's the question. Can the latest round of student protests be justified? Now, we saw instances of buses being burnt on campus. Is that really necessary to burn the buses? Artworks being pulled out of residences and burnt in a pile. I've been told up to 3 million rands worth of art have been torched in the last 24 hours. That's on the UCT campus alone. Send us your tweets at SABC Newsroom now. Our tweet picture of the day, it comes from Ground Up, and it's captioned, Fire set and students arrested in protests over the accommodation shortage at UCT. Hashtag is Shackville. There you see those paintings being torched, being set alight on the campus grounds there. 3 million rand lying, burning in the street. Moving further afield now, let's take a look at the front pages from around the globe. We start in the United States of America, where the USA Today reports former United Nations Secretary General Boutros Boutros-Ghali, who served a turbulent 5-year term ending in 1996. That's at the UN. Died earlier this week in his native Cairo. Then we move to India. The Hindu says tax authorities have issued a reminder to the Vodafone Group asking the company to pay 14,200 rupees of tax dues or risk having its assets seized. Then, finally, in Europe, the Times reports that a very stressed David Cameron pleaded with European leaders not to water down his renegotiation yesterday, as he warned that Britain was in danger of voting to leave the European Union. Can you imagine what that would mean to the world as we know it today? Now, let's take a quick look at what's happening in the courts here in South Africa. Of course, as always, here in the capital in Pretoria, there we are, the capital in Pretoria, where 2 suspects accused of killing Northwest businessman Wandile Bozwana are expected to appear in the Magistrates Court. Bozwana, of course, was gunned down on the Garsfontein off-ramp in Pretoria last year. The suspects face a charge of murder and one of attempted murder. Then, in Cape Town, 8 students I mentioned a little bit earlier, they are expected in the Wynberg Magistrates Court after another night of violence on the UCT campus. The students have been suspended from the university, and well, that suspension could be ratified in the days and weeks to come. Time for us to take a quick break now. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News. Don't go away.
A very good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to a higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon. You're with the news at 1 in the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon only on the SABC News channel.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom here on SABC News now. Our focus today across Eastern and Southern Africa, millions of children struggling to cope with food insecurity, the lack of water, disease and threats to their education and safety. After 2 years of erratic rainfall and drought in most Southern African countries, one of the most powerful El Niño weather events for more than 50 years is wreaking havoc on lives and livelihoods. Now, for more detail on this, we were joined a little earlier by Megan Gilgan, who's the Regional Emergency Advisor for UNICEF in the Eastern and South African region. Now, she gave us the state of affairs in Southern Africa and Ethiopia.
We are looking at 24 million children across the region that will be food insecure in 2016, and we anticipate that approximately 1 million children will need treatment for severe acute malnutrition. So the situation is very, very grave.
Now, the effects of the El Niño are felt on almost every continent, and when that disaster strikes, normally children are the most vulnerable. What can be done to help to protect the children from this particular situation?
Well, I think we've been working very closely with governments who have been mobilizing in anticipation of the El Niño event. So working to make sure that the social safety nets that exist are expanded to include additional beneficiaries and children, but also making sure that the social services that are provided are strengthened so that there is good services to treat malnutrition, but also that we look at the other social implications, that we do everything we can to keep children in school, and that we do everything we can to make sure we mitigate some of the impacts of this situation on children and the family. We want to prevent children from dropping out of school, engaging in different forms of child labor, and being subject to other risks because of the drought.
Now, severe acute malnutrition rates are set to increase dramatically over the next year, it is indicated. What are the risks that children are exposed to further besides just malnutrition?
Sure. I mean, when children are malnourished, when they're not getting enough food or water in their household, they're at increased risk of disease. Their immunity is impacted. So we could see issues of diarrheal disease, measles outbreaks, etc., that we've already seen in the region, but we could see those becoming more widespread. And as I was saying, the kind of secondary risks, if a child drops out of school, it's very difficult to get that child back into school. So this El Niño effect that we're seeing will definitely have a very acute effect for the next couple of years. But unless we take the required action, we could see a very long-term impact for all of those children that don't get the education that they need and don't go on to be able to contribute to their societies in the future.
Now let's look at the plan of action. What are UNICEF and the partners doing to assist and help?
Well, we've been working closely with governments in this region for many months. As I said, we had some warning that this was coming, that this El Nino event would have this sort of impact. We've been working with governments on the social safety net to make sure that families that are not getting enough food have some additional cash to be able to buy that food. We've been working with governments also and partners to make sure that the nutrition systems have stood up so that we can find those children that are not getting adequate food intake, that are becoming malnourished, and make sure that we treat them early so that they can recover. And as I said, also making sure that we are tracking children that are vulnerable to dropping out of school and doing everything that we can to make sure that they actually stay in school. These all are efforts that we need to redouble in the coming months. As I said, this is going to be a very protracted crisis. We're not likely to see a significant recovery for the rest of this year or potentially into 2017. So this is going to be a long, require quite a lot of long and hard work from governments, partners, and UNICEF and other UN agencies are very dedicated to continue to support that.
Is there enough funding, though, available for this humanitarian action that are required?
There's not, and I think that's one of the key issues that we want to highlight. This is a little bit of a forgotten crisis. You will be very aware of all of the different humanitarian crises going on in the world that are preoccupying the humanitarian community. And we really want to make sure that while those are also important priorities, that people recognize the impact that this crisis is having on children, and that we make sure that governments and international donors put the adequate resources in early to make sure that we can mitigate the impacts of this crisis.
Mm-hmm. And how are you coping at the moment, though?
We are very, very underfunded as UNICEF. We have anticipated now that we need immediately $150 million to support government and partners to respond to this drought and nutrition crisis. As of now, we have hardly any of those funds in the bank. So it is something that we really want to be able to highlight as urgent needs for donors in this region. But in addition, I think we also have to recognize that government resources in Southern Africa are also limited. With the economic slowdown in the world, low prices of commodities, governments don't have the kind of resources that they had before to be able to put finances into these emergency responses. So it is very much a call for additional resources coming from governments, but also coming from donors.
Yeah, that was Elvis in conversation with UNICEF about the effect of the drought. Now, let's just recap, of course, the story of the day in South Africa is very much the Sona debate. That's the debate around the State of the Nation address. Now, the entire caucus of the EFF has walked out to the National Assembly yesterday after its leader, Julius Malema, completed his speech. Various political parties were yesterday debating President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address in a joint sitting of Parliament. Now, lots and lots of comments on social media. Let's have a look at a few of those views that have been expressed with regards to what's been going on in Parliament. Wandile Kuzwao says, Sona debate was disturbing. Ideas of eradicating poverty were supposed to be shared and discussed, not bashing each other, says Wandile. Brenda says, Betuna, let truth be told. The Sona debate yesterday had very little to do with Sona and more to do with attacks against the presidency. Paniza says, we appreciate progress, but it's irrelevant to always compare progress against 1994. We need to move on. Hashtag Sona debate. Those are some of the views, of course, at around 2 o'clock this afternoon. Matters will once again proceed in Parliament. And our question today, well, something completely unrelated. Overnight, we've seen quite a bit of unrest on the campus of University of Cape Town. Rather, there are also other universities where issues continue to simmer. Can the latest round of student protests be justified? What are your views on that question? Now, let's take a quick look at what is happening on Newsroom's very own Facebook page. Now, Management of the University of Cape Town says it's now in the process of obtaining an interdict against students belonging to the Rhodes Must Fall campaign. And in Uganda, the leading challenger to Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni said yesterday that he had no confidence that elections this week could be free or fair, as all the major candidates held huge rallies in the capital, Kampala, to mark the end of the campaign. Then finally, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert released a video statement insisting on his innocence on Monday before arriving at a prison in a motorcade to begin a 19-month sentence for corruption. All of those stories and a whole lot more on our Newsroom Facebook page. You can also go to sabc.co.za. Now, time for us to take a break, but when we come back, well, I'll be talking to Piers Pigo over here about the international response to the food crisis here in Southern Africa. So don't go away.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
I'm Peter Ndoro. And I'm Prabhakshini Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, and Hauser Bush Imbev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful.
Have you ever considered skin bleaching? Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally. Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and Your World on SABC News.
Hello again, you're still at Newsroom on SABC News. Now, Zimbabwe needs about 15 billion rand in aid to help pay for grain and other foods. The government there has extended its plea for aid now to international donors to get an international and broader perspective on Zimbabwe. We're joined in studio by the International Crisis Group's Southern Africa Project Director, Piers Pigo. A very good morning to you, Piers. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning.
If I can start with you, maybe let's start in Zimbabwe and give us, we've heard what the Zimbabwean government said a little bit earlier. Can you give us a kind of overview of the situation playing itself out in Zimbabwe right now?
Well, as we've heard from some of your previous guests, there's been a sense of this coming down the pipe for some time in terms of the crisis, and that this is going to be going on for some time. The entire country is affected, the southern provinces most egregiously, and it's impacting and compacting an already very problematic socio-economic set of circumstances where the vast majority of Zimbabweans are reliant on the informal sector and critically on food security from rural areas. Now, the rural areas have been very badly affected, and household security in those areas is deteriorating rapidly. Over 17,000 livestock have been killed, had to be killed in the last few months, and people are really struggling. A bucket of maize price has gone up by 3 times in the last 4 months. So we're going to see increased dependency in a context of acute socio-economic problems and a very, very problematic and fragile political situation in Zim.
How long do you expect this situation, or how long do you expect this crisis to continue before it mitigates itself a little bit, maybe?
Well, I think it will vary from place to place, but there is a projection now that we're looking into 2017, which of course then plays into the politics and the lead up to the 2018 elections in Zimbabwe. So there's a real concern about how those two processes and concerns intersect.
How do you see that play out? Because bread and butter issues really play itself out at the polls. This crisis, do you see this as being overly politicized in the next year and a bit?
Well, there's a very real fear that that may well happen, and there already have been some indications over the last 4 or 5 months, as the situation has gradually deteriorated, that we are seeing some evidence of the politicization of food aid. And of course you have a long history of political manipulation of food distribution in Zimbabwe. So I think we should be realistic that this is a very real potential, and that we need to make sure that monitoring and assessment mechanisms are in place with the distribution mechanisms.
We see the number that's been put down. 15 billion rands worth of aid is needed in the short term to just feed the people of Zimbabwe. The international response to this crisis is rather muted. Are you surprised by that, or is it a simple thing that there's not a lot of money going around on the planet?
Well, it's a combination of that in terms of competing crises and a reduced budget available in terms of meeting those dilemmas. But also, once again, we see a repeat of the repetition of having to deal with these issues too late down the track. And the real danger in this situation is we can't source food from the region, as we've previously done over the last few years where there has been food insecurity. And we have to find food from other parts of the world, and that requires a longer lead-in time to get that food across the oceans, and also the terrible logistical constraints that we're going to have getting that food into the interior of the southern African continent.
Now, you talked about the uncertain political climate in Zimbabwe. How do you see this crisis causing more instability in the short term there?
Well, I think one of the major challenges that you have with the current political situation is the extent to which food can be played out in terms of factional politics inside the ruling party. And we're already hearing anecdotal evidence of how food is being withheld from certain parts of the community who are not deemed to be on side with the particular strongmen in those communities. Now, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out in the urban areas where there is less political control compared to the rural areas. And it was in the rural areas 25 years or so ago, where actually nearly 30 years ago, in the urban areas where we had the uprisings with the increases in food prices. And we're beginning to see a spike in those food prices, and they're only going to go up. So we expect to see different responses from different parts of the country. Whether or not that ignites into what some people think might be some kind of Zimbabwean spring, we think at this stage is unlikely. But we do see a lot more resistance. But the politics of survival in Zimbabwe means that Zimbabweans will look, and they've been very adept over the years, to find alternatives to survive. But those options are drying up at the moment.
Well, let's just widen the net a little bit. Let's talk about the rest of Southern Africa. There are quite a few other countries under the pump, Malawi being one as well. How do you see this situation playing itself in the rest of Southern Africa, and what needs to happen to kind of deal with it?
Well, the critical issue really is money and getting the logistics sorted out in terms of the distribution mechanisms. Now, in many parts of the region, there is a basic infrastructure to put that in place. It's making sure that the right resources are in place to actually implement. And that's the crisis and the call that we have right now. In other areas, this is in other parts of the region, there are obviously the political problems, like in Zimbabwe and areas of Mozambique, where we have latent insurgency and the problems there. So it will vary from place to place, but the critical areas are to make sure that government and the aid agencies are working closely together, but also that this is going to require private sector involvement as well. If I can just mention, in the early 1990s, when we had the last major problem of this nature in Zimbabwe, we had the use of commercial farmers who donated thousands of trucks to distribute. We don't have that mechanism, that infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. Times have certainly changed in Zimbabwe. Thank you for joining us today. Piers Pigu, he's with the International Crisis Group, he's Southern Africa's project director. Yeah, thank you for joining us this morning. Now, another story, of course, is happening. There's an election in Uganda. The leading challenger to the president, Yoweri Museveni, says he has no confidence that the elections will be free or fair. as all the major candidates hold huge rallies in the capital, Kampala, to mark the end of their campaigns. Now, the election is set for tomorrow. Lots of comments coming out of Uganda with regards to, well, instability. But let's have a look at some of the comments, what people are saying. Just hours to that. Kevin says, just hours to that major decision for our nation. Are you Ugandan? Cast that ballot for the next chief of state. Uganda decides tomorrow. Rich Soul says, I'm proudly Ugandan. I love my country and the people therein. Therefore, Uganda decides, I pledge to pray for peace. So should you. Then Ruth talks about Uganda decides time to work for the bigger picture, not individualism that we have seen for so many years. I think it would be many years, but it's kind of an apt pun there. So many years ahead. Time for us now to go to the weather desk with Philip Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, starting off with your weather, we're going to start off again, of course, with what's been going on in terms of your cloud cover. And, of course, you can see some cloud cover, a lot of mid-level cloud cover, really, over the northern parts of Central Africa. Really cloud cover, though, concentrated over the southern parts of Central Africa, down the western coastlines around the Namibian region there, and then in towards South Africa. We're still seeing that dense band of cloud cover moving across the North African region here. West African regions expecting that as a result of lower pressure systems, and you can see that acting on the region, the cloud cover just coming through that entire area there. Lower pressure systems also acting throughout Central Africa for today to bring in a little bit of rainfall. Moving into this afternoon, it intensifies, especially through the interior there around Zambia's northeastern regions. Now, as we can see, as we move into a little bit more detailed forecast, we're seeing some slightly lower temperatures in South Africa than we were yesterday, so very, very good news for many areas. Pretoria peaking slightly cooler than yesterday at only 36 degrees for today. I do say only, but of course that is still going to be a hot day. Isolated to scattered showers forecast throughout almost the entire southern African region here. But moving further north, that's going to continue in some areas, but dry up in others. As you can see, Dar es Salaam even receiving some rain for today, a 33-degree maximum there, but just further north there around Kilimanjaro, Mombasa, neither of these areas expecting any rainfall whatsoever. Now, of course, we did say we're expecting a fair amount of rainfall around Lilongwe and the surrounding areas, so do expect that later this afternoon. 27-degree maximums forecast for you this afternoon as well, with some cloud cover coming in towards Mogadishu, Juba, Addis Ababa, all expecting that cloud cover, but of course Addis Ababa, one of the cooler regions, they're peaking at a mild 23-degree maximum. Now, moving north into the Middle Eastern region here, we're still seeing cooler temperatures in Tehran at only 11 degrees. Cairo peaking even warmer than yesterday at 32 now. A full 3 degrees warmer than yesterday's 29-degree maximum. So temperatures definitely coming up quickly in Cairo. We're going to see that all changing, though, as we look towards the western coastlines there. Behind the frontal system, we're seeing some fairly chilly temperatures. Rabat peaking at 14, as is Algiers, 16 for Tunis, and temperatures rising, of course, as we move ahead of that frontal system towards Benghazi at 27 degrees. Now, no rainfall forecast for that area at the moment, and almost no rainfall as well throughout the rest of West Africa, at least for the major cities anyway. Taking a look towards Bamako, we're seeing some very warm temperatures there, 37-degree highs. Along the southern coastline of West Africa, seeing some warm temperatures too, 30 to 32-degree maximums. Quickly towards West Africa's, or rather Central Africa's western regions here, seeing a lot of rainfall. Kinshasa peaking at 37 degrees and a hot 39-degree maximum for Bangui. That's where I leave your weather for now. Do stay tuned.
Romantic adventure film starring Ivan Buerta and Donnelly Roberts. The story begins in the beautiful vineyards of Paarl in the Western Cape. The adventure takes off when the characters find themselves on the tropical island of Love, Mauritius.
Josephine's work is more interesting and distinguishable. She visits war-stricken zone countries to tell the story of the damage war often leaves behind.
This particular exhibition's case places that are named after conflict or disaster or war or reconciliation.
And basically what it is it's a collection of the best animated short films from around the world this year. And the idea is to inspire animators and directors with this exciting content. And so that's been offered to us as a cinema, and we're very excited to be screening the animated show of shows here in South Africa.
Join Refulo Mulwa for that 1 hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends. Ahika Manor produces abstract and symbolic works of art. He called his latest collection Vote with Ink, Not Blood.
Praying for peace, literally, in my own way.
The South African film titled Luister or Listen in Afrikaans tackles issues of race in the country.
I think that the end goal is the reformation of institutional culture, but how we get there is in fact through changing the language policy so that no student is forced to learn in Afrikaans.
It's fashion designers like Julia Mpoko who are starting to pay more attention to menswear and hope to make a mark in the fashion industry.
So regardless of whether you're African, European, there's certain styles that you like. So if an African man enjoys wearing simple, well-tailored pants, then yes, I guess.
Join Refulo Mulwa for that 1 hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends.
10:00 hours Central African time on this Wednesday, the 17th of February 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News Channel 404. You've just joined us, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the second hour. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 1200 hours. You have to stay with us as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios, Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. As you know, we're also streaming live on YouTube, with the entire show now available on our YouTube channel. We're asking you a question today, a very important one. Can the latest round of student protests in the country be justified? I'd like to find out from you. Let us know on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on our Facebook page. But first, let's take a look at your news headlines. Overnight clashes between police and students at the University of Cape Town. The debate on President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address continues today. And the current United Nations Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, has praised his late Egyptian predecessor, Boutros Ghali. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from the man in the sports news, Kendall Makamate. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Elvis. Very interesting morning that we've had so far. Most of it is about results from last night, as well as a little bit about boardroom and courtroom politics. But good morning to you. This is what we have for you in the sports today. In the UEFA Champions League, Edinson Cavani comes off the bench to score the winner against Chelsea.
He does get there and scores! A sensational substitution for Paris Saint-Germain.
It was an out-of-court settlement.
Chippa United chairman Chippa Mpengezi clears the air around Rogers Kakani's court case. And all this as Kenya's athletics head takes special leave as an investigation gets underway into claims that he solicited bribes from athletes who failed drugs tests. That's what we've got for you. Be sure to stick around for that. All that and a little bit more at 10:20 or so. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. He will be back a little bit later, so stay tuned. Top story this hour. Police and students clashed at the University of Cape Town last night. Police fired rubber bullets and stun grenades to disperse a crowd of students on the main campus. They were called in to help a private company demolish a shack erected by supporters of the Rhodes Must Fall movement. Some folk were arrested on the campus.
These were some of the scenes at the UCT lower campus. A jammy shuttle was set alight, including a car parked at the institution. Students also destroyed artwork from one of the buildings. Police say they were forced to take action when the protest turned violent.
The only reason I'm emotional is that this is what we have to do to get management to listen to us. If it means signing a paper to ensure insourcing or ensuring that students aren't homeless, this is what we have to do.
Police visited the university to tear down a shack erected by students after they failed to meet a 5 p.m. deadline to remove it. Attempts to form a human chain to prevent its dismantling unsuccessful. Protesters have complained about the lack of accommodation for black students. UCT management has condemned the protests. The institution's Elijah Molola says they will take steps against those responsible for the damage of its property. Police have opened cases of housebreaking and malicious damage to property. Vanessa Puna, SABC News, UCT, Cape Town.
Still on the UCT story, the university management says the 8 arrested students have been suspended. Now, they will appear in the Wynberg Magistrates Court for charges of public violence and malicious damage to property. We'll bring you an update from our report a little bit later, but for more on the story now, we're joined by the university spokesperson Elijah Mohololo on the line to us. A very good morning to you, Elijah. And firstly, how's the situation at the university currently as we speak? Has things gone back to normal?
At the moment, the situation has been stabilized, everything is proceeding, and as we said late last night, campus operations are proceeding today as usual.
Now, we do believe that some students have been arrested. Tell us about those students. Are they from a particular grouping?
We have had 8 students who got arrested for their involvement in this illegal act that took place last evening, and in our understanding at the moment that 7 of these are UCT students and 1 is not a UC student. We picked up that there has been an involvement also of students who are not necessarily, well, people who are not necessarily UCT students who have been involved in this protest action.
Talk to us about the damage caused after last night's protest.
It's a situation where they went into university buildings, residences around where the shack was erected, and they grabbed the university's artwork and they burned such. And we've also had a situation where vehicles were set alight, a journey shuttle was set alight, and we've also had, I think, about 2 other vehicles that were in the vicinity that were also set alight.
In the insert we had earlier, we heard one of the students saying that this is the only way that they can communicate with management. Is that a true reflection of what's happening on the ground, that you do not engage with the students?
What is very worrying is how the students are going about distorting the facts around the situation. Because we've had, for instance, on Friday, the management extended an invitation to RMF members for a meeting. That request was turned down. On Monday as well, the management requested the same RMF to come to a meeting, come to the table, discuss whatever concern. That invitation as well was rejected. On Monday, during the protest at the shack, at the area where the shack was erected, we've had the management trying to address the same students, and such efforts have been unsuccessful. So we've had a situation where the management is willing, and it has indicated to RMF that they are willing to engage with RMF, but persistently, RMF is turning such invitations down.
What is the major sticking point with the students at this point in time? Is it only about the accommodation, or what is it?
As far as we are understanding and picking up informally from the students themselves, the student body themselves, is that it is an issue of accommodation, which the university has acknowledged that it is a challenge because we have only 6,680 beds for 27,000 students. We can only accommodate 25% of our student population in our university residences. We've also had 2 worrying distortions that have been bandied about by RMF. They were alleging that white students get preference when university residence allocations are done. We can put it out there that 75% of students who were housed in residence in 2015 were actually black. We don't have the 2016 stats yet, but in 2015 we had 75% of students in our residences being black. They've also claimed that overseas students who come to UCT as semester study abroad students, they get given preference when it comes to allocation of accommodation. But what you can put out there as well is that we've only had 1.8% of overseas students having secured a place in university residence. That is only 125 students out of 6,680 beds. So both the claims of RMF or any other protester around these 2 areas are nothing but inaccurate.
So are you suggesting that the protest then is a smokescreen to what is actually happening on the ground?
Look, it might be because once this accommodation challenge came to the fore, the university management acknowledged it and worked on various measures of dealing with this. We've had measures put in place. We've had students put in temporary accommodation, provided with transport, provided with meals, which we acknowledge is not an ideal situation. But every day the university is working at resolving any outstanding accommodation challenges. One of the things that indicates the progress that has been made is that when this challenge came to the fore, there were about 800 students involved. At this stage, the last we checked, there were about 100 students involved. So steadily and surely the university is doing 2 things. It's placing students who have applied and who have received financial assistance into university residences, as well as assisting others who need accommodation, with securing such off campus. And one of the other things that also added to the whole complexity is that you had students as well who for some reason have not applied for university accommodation, yet they are waiting to be assisted, and the university is doing whatever it can to assist. However, in the midst of all this, you have the action of RMF. They've been disrupting, they've been interfering with operations, and that in itself has led to additional delays in how these accommodation challenges are handled.
Just briefly, Elijah, do we know if the academic activities will continue today? And we also understand that you will have a media briefing later today, the latest on that as well.
Yes, the academic activities are continuing as usual today. We haven't had any since this unfortunate incident of late last evening. We haven't had anything this morning. So the position of the university at this stage is that activities are proceeding as scheduled. And yes, we are going to be having a press conference at 11 where the Vice-Chancellor as well as the senior leadership, the senior executive will be dealing or addressing these issues that came up last evening.
Elijah, thank you so much for your time. That was Elijah Moholola, the University of Cape Town spokesperson, giving us the latest on last night's incident at the university. And of course, we're asking you a very important question to that effect in terms of your thoughts on the matter in relation to the latest student uprising and the student protest. Can the latest round of student protest be justified? You can send it to our Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Also like us on the Facebook page and get us there and post your comments. Now, our reporter, Kamel Lochtenberg, is at the Wynberg Magistrates Court for charges of public violence and malicious damage to property against the students that was arrested last night. Let's find out from her. Kamel, a very good morning to you. And can you give us an update what is happening there?
Yes, a very good morning to you, Elvis. Well, news just in is that the 8 students who were arrested and suspended yesterday, they have subsequently appeared in court. Now, what we have heard is that they have been granted bail. 7 of the students have been granted R1,000 bail and 1 student has been granted R800 bail.
Did you have a chance to maybe speak to them and find out their motives for last night's activities?
Yes, Elvis. What we do expect then to happen is the line is quite bad at the moment, but what we do expect to happen now is that these students will later today be released and we'll be waiting then to try and get comment from them.
Mel, thank you so much for that update. As you heard, we got a very bad connection there. She can't really hear me, and we'll get an update on that a little bit later as well. Meanwhile, lectures are expected to resume tomorrow at the Durban University of Technology. Now, the lectures were suspended following protests sparked by the death of a student at one of the institution's residences. The student is alleged to have committed suicide on Friday after being denied financial assistance. The funding body says the 19-year-old had been granted assistance. On Monday, students embarked on protests forcing the university to shut down. Academic activities on the Maikeng campus, meanwhile, in the northwest, remain suspended following this week's violent student protest. Management has launched an investigation into acts of vandalism and arson. The protesting students want outsourcing to be discontinued and for students with outstanding debt to be registered. They also want suspended SRC President Benz Mabangwane to be reinstated. Both the EFF Students' Command and the South African Students' Congress have denied any involvement in the disruption of lectures and vandalism at the university. On the other hand, Wits University's SRC says it managed to raise over 3 million rand of the 10 million rand target it sets that it needs to assist students with outstanding debt. The Wits Access campaign is seeking to help about 8,000 students described as the missing middle. Now, these are students who are considered to be too rich to receive funding from the National Students Financial Aid Scheme, yet they cannot afford tertiary education. Wits SRC Secretary General Fasiha Hassan says that they need a more sustainable solution, or at least a more sustainable method.
Remember, access is this urgent response, but we recognize that we need a more sustainable solution, or at least a more sustainable method. We are still engaging with government. We are still engaging with corporate South Africa. We're still engaging with NSFAS to look at greater solutions that are long-term. Does that mean that we raise or we change the means test for NSFAS? That's something that we're discussing. That's a short-term goal. But what we want from government is a roadmap or a timeline for free and quality education for the poor.
Now, back to our earlier story, our reporter Kamel Lochtenberg is at the Wynberg Magistrates Court for the charges of public violence and malicious damage to property against the students. Kamel, I hope you can hear me better this time. Just to follow up, was there any support for the students that was in court this morning? Well, unfortunately, we can't get hold of Kamel. It seems like we have a bad connection there. Let's move on now. The debate on President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address continues today. The economy took centre stage yesterday with opposition parties weighing in on current issues.
Opposition parties used their time to shred the government's plan of action as outlined by President Zuma.
We cannot respect a man personally responsible for the building of Nkandla and the firing of Nkandla.
What kind of a self-respecting country fails to produce food for itself despite the availability of arable land? More than 10 million workers who wake up every day to sell their labor, they do not get any living wage.
For the UDM, a request for the president to do the right thing.
Give us a mandate, Msholos, to handle your exit in a dignified manner. Further, and to avoid another embarrassing sitting president scoring own goals.
Focusing on the sluggish economy, the ruling party says it's committed to providing incentives to attract investments in various industries, and the implementation of the 9-point plan and industrialization policy will go full steam ahead.
I'm happy to indicate that we already have pledges of over 30 billion rand from institutions like the Land Bank, the Industrial Development Corporation.
I remember that even when I sat in cabinet some 10 years ago, we were constantly being asked to bail out the South African Airways. Why are we still doing it? Too often it comes down to poor policy decisions.
He made a serious error when he appointed Van Rooyen as a Minister of Finance to appease the Guptas, and in doing so, wiped out almost 700 billion rand of wealth in South Africa. The president remained silent.
Bulelani Philip, SABC News, Parliament.
Across eastern and southern Africa, millions of children are struggling to cope with food insecurity, lack of water, disease, and the threat to their education and safety. After 2 years of erratic rainfall and drought in some countries, one of the most powerful El Niño weather events for more than 50 years is wreaking havoc on lives and livelihoods. For more on this, we earlier spoke to Megan Gilgan, the Regional Emergency Advisor for UNICEF Eastern and Southern Africa at the regional office.
We are looking at 24 million children across the region that will be food insecure in 2016, and we anticipate that approximately 1 million children will need treatment for severe acute malnutrition. So the situation is very, very grave.
Now, the effects of the El Niño are felt on almost every continent, and when that disaster strikes, normally children are the most vulnerable. What can be done to help to protect the children from this particular situation?
Well, I think we've been working very closely with governments who have been mobilizing in anticipation of the El Niño event. So working to make sure that the social safety nets that exist are expanded to include additional beneficiaries and children, but also making sure that the social services that are provided are strengthened so that there is good services to treat malnutrition, but also that we look at the other social implications, that we do everything we can to keep children in school, and that we do everything we can to make sure we mitigate some of the impacts of this situation on children and the family. We want to prevent children from dropping out of school, engaging in different forms of child labor, and being subject to other risks because of the drought.
Now, severe acute malnutrition rates are set to increase dramatically over the next year, it is indicated. What are the risks that children are exposed to further besides just malnutrition?
Sure. I mean, when children are malnourished, when they're not getting enough food or water in their household, they're at increased risk of disease. Their immunity is impacted. So we could see issues of diarrheal disease, measles outbreaks, etc., that we've already seen in the region, but we could see those becoming more widespread. And as I was saying, the kind of secondary risks, if a child drops out of school, it's very difficult to get that child back into school. So this El Niño effect that we're seeing will definitely have a very acute effect for the next couple of years. But unless we take the required action, we could see a very long-term impact for all of those children that don't get the education that they need and don't go on to be able to contribute to their societies in the future.
The World Food Programme has also raised concern about food security in southern Africa, where an estimated 14 million people are facing hunger following prolonged dry spells that led to a poor harvest last year. The weather condition is said to have been worsened by El Niño, a pattern which typically brings drier conditions to southern Africa and wetter ones in East Africa.
South Africa faces its worst drought in decades after 2015 was the driest calendar year since records began in 1904. The drought was hit by much of the region, including the maize belt in South Africa, the continent's most advanced economy and the top producer of the staple grain. Expectations of a dire crop this season could force the country to import up to 6 million tons of maize, over half of its consumption needs.
They warn that southern Africa is currently in the grip of an intense drought that has expanded and strengthened, driven one of the strongest El Niño events in the last 50 years. Across large swaths of Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, South Africa, Mozambique, Botswana, and Madagascar, the current rainfall has so far been the driest in the last 35 years. While it is too early to provide detailed estimates of the population likely to be food insecure in 2016 and 17, it is expected that the population in need of emergency food assistance and livelihood recovery support will increase significantly.
In countries such as Malawi, much of the maize crop is produced by small-scale farmers, often just to feed their own families. The vast majority are utterly dependent on rainfall as they cannot afford irrigation systems. The Farm Input Subsidy Program was launched in 2005, but economists in Malawi say it is not enough.
The subsidy can only succeed if there is sufficient rain, not too much, not too little. Fertilizers will do nothing if the soil is dry. So there must be good water in soil. If there are no rains, at least water should come from irrigation. So when you talk about subsidy thing, you must look at the question, when there's no rain, what do we do? The answer is irrigation.
The World Food Programme is looking to scale up its food and cash-based assistance programs in the worst-hit countries, but faces critical funding challenges. The worst affected country in the region is Malawi, where 2.8 million people, 16% of the population, are expected to go hungry, followed by the Indian Ocean island of Madagascar, where almost 1.9 million are at risk. In Zimbabwe, 1.5 million people, more than 10% of the population, face hunger.
This season is really bad as we can want to compare with the previous year, like last year. Last year we managed to receive some rains whereby our communities managed to plant something in the ground. But this year it's a bad year.
The drought has been worsened by an exceptionally strong El Niño weather pattern, a warming of ocean surface temperatures in the eastern and central Pacific that occurs every few years with ripple effects around the globe. El Niño events typically bring dry conditions to southern Africa and wetter ones to East Africa. In Ethiopia alone, 435,000 children will require treatment for severe acute malnutrition, and the number of people in need of food assistance is expected to increase from over 10 million currently to 18 million by the end of 2016. The situation is likely to get worse before it improves. Families face multiple challenges as they enter their second failed harvest, with much of the livestock lost, food reserves depleted, and access to water severely curtailed. The situation is aggravated by rising food prices, forcing many vulnerable households to skip meals and sell off assets. The dry, hot conditions are expected to persist until the start of the Southern Hemisphere autumn in April or May.
2 people have been killed and 23 others were injured after an accident between a scholar transport, a minibus and a sedan in Kimberley. The accident happened on the R705 road just outside Jacobsdal. The dead include the driver of a sedan and a 17-year-old learner from a local school who were on their way to a sporting event in Kimberley. The injured were transferred to the Kimberley Hospital complex, and our attempts to get comment from the hospital drew a blank.
As a police, we are busy with our investigations to actually determine as to what might have caused the accident. But presently, we have two people that have lost their lives. It's a 17-year-old boy which was actually inside in the bus that was traveling from Jacobstown going to Kimberley, and a 37-year-old man who was actually driving the BMW, which it is alleged to have collided with the bus. So we presently have opened a case docket of a couple homicide, and to actually lead us with the investigation.
How many people have been injured?
We have on our books we have 23, of which is the school children that were in the bus, and on the other vehicle it was only the driver which was in the vehicle.
Okay. And then where are they? Have they maybe been taken to the hospital? Which hospital? Or?
Yes, those who suffered different, we can say, injuries were taken to Kimberley Hospital, and some were treated there with the local doctors from Jacobstown.
Further afield now, Uganda's presidential contenders have held their final rallies ahead of tomorrow's presidential election. The rallies were held a day after the worst violence of the 3-month campaign. President Yoweri Museveni has ruled Uganda for 3 decades but faces his toughest test yet. He has come under fire from the opposition over high unemployment and the poor state of the country's schools and health centres. His main challenger, Kizza Besigye, says that he has no confidence that the election will be free or fair. He was speaking a day after police stormed a campaign rally with tear gas and briefly held him in custody. 1 person died in the chaos and at least 19 others were injured. The current UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has praised his late Egyptian predecessor, Boutros Ghali. Now, he died in a Cairo hospital at the age of 93 after suffering a broken pelvis.
This was Boutros Ghali taking his oath of office in 1991, a historic first for Africa and the Arab world, a role he would embrace, at least according to his own words, on his very first day in office.
We will create a new momentum in favor of this organization, which is our organization, and hoping that this momentum will help us to play a more important role in peacekeeping, peace building, and in economic, social cooperation, and above all, defending human rights and the democratic institutions all over the world.
24 years later, his successor paying tribute.
As the Secretary General, he presided over a dramatic rise in UN peacekeeping. He also presided over a time when the world increasingly turned to the United Nations for solutions to its problems in the immediate aftermath of the Cold War.
Boutros Ghali's tenure at the United Nations was also controversial, coming during the Balkan and Rwandan genocides, where the leadership of this institution and the Security Council came in for heavy criticism for its failure to prevent the mass slaughter of civilians. He also had a fractious relationship with the United States, then the unmatched superpower of the world, that used its veto to block his bid for a second term as Secretary General in 1996. Earlier, the UN Security Council observed a moment of silence. A tenure that would be shaped in the post-Cold War era and the shifting sands of a world that would require a greater role for the United Nations. Boutros Ghali was 93. Sherwin Bryceby's SABC News, New York.
Former South African President Thabo Mbeki has issued a statement on the passing of Boutros Ghali, the first African Secretary General of the United Nations. President Mbeki says that when he served as the Secretary General of the UN between January 1992 and December 1996, Boutros Ghali did his best to properly assert the high standing of the office of the United Nations Secretary General. Now you have to stay with us, and we will be back right after this break with your sports news and Kendall Makamate.
For victory requires intense effort and teamwork. When you get to it, there is no turning back, because all eyes are on you. When it's action time, nothing should stand in your way. Sports Live tackles and analyzes all the sport action. This is the home of all your sport news, updates and more. Sports Live weekdays at 8:30 p.m.
I'm Peter Ndoro. And I'm Production Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, and House of Bush InBev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful.
Have you ever considered skin bleaching? Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally.
Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and Your World on SABC News.
Good morning, welcome back. I'm Kendall Makamate. I've got your sports on Newsroom. Now, the turmoil in Kenyan athletics continues. Athletics Kenya's chief executive has asked for 21 days leave, pending an investigation into bribery allegations. It's alleged that Isaac Mwangi asked for money to reduce the doping bans of 2 suspended Kenyan athletes.
Kenya has long been regarded as the global frontrunner in distance running. And at the 2015 World Championships in Beijing, the country topped the medals table with 7 gold medals. But Kenya has been rocked by doping and corruption scandals recently, and last week 2 banned athletes, Joy Sakari and Koki Manunga, accused Mwangi of seeking around 450,000 rand each to reduce their 4-year bans. Mwangi immediately denied the claims.
Our rules do not allow doping, and anyone caught doping, there is no way out. We'll expose you, we will kick you out of our competition, and will not allow anyone to taint the good name that this country has always had.
Athletics Kenya has since confirmed that its newly formed anti-doping agency of Kenya will investigate the allegations against Mwangi.
We would like to finish this thing as fast as possible, with, of course, looking at the individual rights of everybody. We would like to see that the sport is protected by all means.
ADAC is expected to report its findings in 2 weeks. But the spike in doping and recent corruption allegations against top AK officials continue to stoke fears in the country that they could follow Russia and be suspended from global athletics. Liesel Zankel, SABC News.
Now to football news, where Paris Saint-Germain and Benfica will go into the second leg having an advantage after winning the first legs of the UEFA Champions League last 16 ties last night. Now basically, Zenit looks set to hold on for a goalless draw. When Domenico Criscito conceded a late foul, earning his second booking in the process. Then from the on-swing free kick, Jonas rose to head in the only goal of this UEFA Champions League last 16 first leg. So basically Benfica takes a narrow lead to Russia in 3 weeks. Edison Cavani came off the bench to give PSG victory after Jean-Obi Mikel had deflected in Zlatan Ibrahimovic's free kick. Mikel then levelled matters and made good on the stroke of half-time. Cavani gave PSG the edge at the end, and so Wednesday night sees Jean take on Wolfsburg and Roma host Real Madrid. Moving on to other sports stories, there's been some sort of ruckus going on in the PSL side Chippa United's house. The former head coach, Rogers Kakani, has been embroiled in a court case because Kakani was put on special leave since the 7th of December after being accused of allegedly reporting for duty smelling of alcohol. This at the Nelson Mandela commemoration match in Mthatha. The chairman of the club, Chippa Mpengesi, claimed that they've settled out of court.
It was an out-of-court settlement. This is my proposal because now the team is doing well. You know, we don't want to focus on the negative stuff. The allegations were brought before me. As a chairman, I had to act. But I've decided, no, look, at the end of the day, let me not act, you know, because let me focus on building this team. Because Chippa United is not a political party. It is a football team where people, our supporters, they want to enjoy winning, you know, seeing us winning, getting those goals, beating those clubs. So I've took a decision to say I'm not going to fight Skakan, even though he went to Labour Court, despise or undermine the PSL, you know. But so today we just made a settlement out of court. Even though I was disappointed when I look at other media sources saying Chippa United has lost the case, there was never a case today. It was just a out-of-court settlement.
Now, staying with more sporting news, Stormers coach Robbie Fleck has decided to appoint co-captains for the 2016 Super Rugby season. Fleck says that giving both Jean de Jong and Frans Malherbe the responsibility of captaining the Cape Town side is an extension of the collective leadership already evident in the team. The experienced de Jong will lead the team out onto the pitch and have the final say in on-field decisions, but will share the captaincy duties with Malherbe, both on and off the field. De Jong captained Western Province to the Currie Cup title in 2014, while tight head prop Malherbe has long been earmarked as a leader within the squad. The Stormers begin their Super Rugby campaign in just under 2 weeks' time with a home fixture against arch rivals, the Bulls. We're done with the sports. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back with more news as well as analysis with Evan Janssen. Stay close.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Ahika Manor produces abstract and symbolic works of art. He called his latest collection Vote with Ink, Not Blood.
Praying for peace, literally, in my own way.
The South African film titled Luister or Listen in Afrikaans tackles issues of race in the country.
I think that the end goal is the reformation of institutional culture, but how we get there is in fact through changing the language policy so that no student is forced to learn in Afrikaans.
It's fashion designers like Julia Mpoko who are starting to pay more attention to menswear and hope to make a mark in the fashion industry.
So regardless of whether you're African, European, there's certain styles that you like. So if an African man enjoys wearing simple, well-tailored pants, then yes, I guess.
Join Refulo Mula for that 1-hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends.
Hello again. Now, Southern Africa is facing severe drought, which has raised concerns about food security, with an estimated 14 million people facing hunger. The dry spells are having a negative impact on the economies in Southern Africa, and it is clear that something drastic needs to happen. We spoke to all of the stakeholders earlier. One professor may just have the solution to all of this. She joins us now from our Seapoint studios in Cape Town, professor in the Department of Molecular and Cell Biology, Jill Ferrand. Her work focuses on cereal crops, which currently provide the bulk of global food supply, particularly African food crops. So, very good morning to you, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Morning, Evan. How are you?
I'm very good today. I've got my hopes for all of our food security pinned on you, Professor. Can you tell us about your plants? I read this. I read the latest report you did, but about the award that you won and so forth. But tell us about the plants, because that's really what it's about. We've dealt with food insecurity today. Tell us what makes these plants different and so special and gives us hope.
Well, first of all, we call them resurrection plants. And the term came about because they appear to resurrect from the dead state, even though they've been there for months or years, when you add water. The reality is that they are not dead. They look it, but they are able to lose 95% of their water without dying, and can stay in that dry, desiccated state for prolonged periods of time until the rain comes, and then within 24 hours, they green up and start growing again. And so what I'm trying to do, or what I have tried to do for the last 22-odd years, is to understand how they do this. How can they lose all that water, which is a very unusual thing to do, and not die? And so in doing so, to transfer some of those mechanisms into crops to make them more drought tolerant. That's
the resurrection plants you're talking about. But they've been around for years, and somehow have gone unnoticed almost, it seems. Tell us about your discovery of their significance, and why then did you then go and decide to base your research on them?
It's a relatively long story. I'm going to nutshell it. I grew up as a farmer's daughter, and the entire climate in my home depended on the weather. If it wasn't raining, it was a problem. If it was raining, it was good, but if it rained with hail, it was a problem. And as a 9-year-old, I noticed these plants resurrecting, wrote it down in my diary, forgot all about it. Went on to do a master's and a PhD in a very different but related subject, and importantly, ties very much up with my discoveries now. I worked on seeds. And at the end of my PhD, got a job offer at Cape Town. The type of seeds I was working on, very unusual ones, weren't available. And two things happened. I had to change research direction. Two things happened. One is that my niece admitted that she hacked into my diary, and I read an insert, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. A week later, someone sent me a paper that was written in 1971 about resurrection plants. My diary entry was 1970. And the two came together, and I thought, wow, I wonder if that's the same phenomenon. I wonder. And I went back to the farm, collected my first lot of resurrection plants, and since then have been trying to understand, as I said earlier, how they do this. So that's the nutshell of how I got into it.
And have you cracked how they do it? Do you get it now?
I get it. I've done a lot of work, and I get it. And I kind of know what I need to do to roll out the research further. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money. But I think the nutshell of all my discoveries has come down to one thing, that what resurrection plants are doing in tolerating all that water loss is exactly what seeds do when they, at the end of the developmental period on the parent plant. So what normally happens is that seed will dry down. 8 to 10% water, it's shed. In that desiccated but alive state, seeds can lie around in any kind of environment for many years, until the next rain comes. Resurrection plants have used those same seed genes. They switch them on in their roots and leaves. So it means that every crop out there has the genetic makeup. They just don't do it the way resurrection plants do it. And what I'm trying to do is to show how resurrection plants turn on those really important genes and then mimic that in crops to have resurrection crops.
I want to talk about your award quickly, the L'Oreal UNESCO Women in Science Award. It's probably just one peg below the Nobel Prize, which shows how big this thing really is. Tell me, What did that kind of recognition mean to you and then to the work that you're hoping to do?
The recognition, it was actually quite a surprise to me that I got the award, but the recognition has done something which I think will help my research in the long run, is to just make me very visible. The solution I offer is probably uniquely South African or African. I don't think commercial farmers in the United States would perhaps use the crops because they're not going to be highly productive, but they'll be very drought tolerant. But it's given me a visibility, and it's given me a face, and it's given me the interest by donors, funding donors, grant holders, to actually put some money into my research so that I can continue this work.
Well, fantastic. I hope it all comes through and we have a complete resurrection crop in South Africa by 2050. That's Professor Jill Farrant.
I do too.
She's doing fantastic work, well, in drought-resistant plants, which is something that we're going to have to really look at quite seriously here in South Africa. Now, we asked you a question earlier. Can the latest round, of course, the latest round of student protests be justified? What are your views? Now, we've got quite a few coming in because people are really interested in this. IG talks about SABC Newsroom. Yes, it can be justified. If students are allowed to study in the institution, they can be provided with residence, I think. Residence. Kismea Charles says, SABC Newsroom, leaders of Roads Must Fall movement have lost a plot. They should be arrested. Wow, that's quite an extreme view we have there. We have another one incoming. Abusing students is not what South Africans fought for. We fought against being abused. We didn't promote it. Talking about Shacksville, yes, but we have to operate within the confines of the law. Now we're going to take a quick look. Well, there's a lot of stories going on today. Shortly we'll be dealing with reptiles, but let's have a quick look at what's happening on our Facebook page before we move on. Now, cold storage companies are gearing up to handle large volumes of imported poultry in the next few weeks. Then the current United Nations Secretary General has lauded his late Egyptian predecessor, Boutros Ghali, as a respected statesman who brought formidable experience and intellectual power to the task of leading the United Nations. Finally, some political parties intend to use the February 24 by-elections in the Tlokwe municipality in Potchefstroom as a test of their strength prior to the 2016 local government elections. Of course, all of that on our Facebook page. Let's take a quick look around the African continent. What are on the front pages? We'll start in Angola today. Now, Jornal de Angola reports that the realization of new public procurement in the sectors of health and education is dependent on the completion of the biometric registration process for civil servants, which runs across the country, said the Minister of Public Administration, Employment and Social Security. Then moving to Zimbabwe, the Chronicle says that beneficiaries of the 2016 Science, Technology, Engineering and Mathematics program risk losing government funding if they underperform in their studies. Last one comes out of Swaziland. The Observer reports that Senator Sibusiso Shongwe, the former Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, is charged with 10 counts involving corruption, fraud, theft and defeating the ends of justice in that country. 10 charges, no less. Now, there's no beating about the bush when it comes to conservation of wild animals and saving our environment. We are all too familiar with the current state of rhino and elephant poaching, trophy hunting, illegal deep-sea fishing, to name a few of the concerns we hear. There's one team that is passionate about all issues conservation and environment, and they're here today to talk to us about this. NatureCast. Now, NatureCast members, Michael Sparks, and reptile expert Matthew
Mathieu van Goethem, yes.
Mathieu van Goethem is with us here. Very good morning to you guys. I see you brought a case with you, Michael. Have you got big snakes in there today?
Yeah, one big snake today.
One big snake. Okay, we'll hang on to the big snake.
Quite hardcore getting it through security.
I know. It must have been quite a mission to get it into the building because we've got it's a national key point.
Yeah. Sure.
So, it's very difficult to get stuff in and out of the building, especially big snakes that scare people, Matthew. Anyhow, tell us a little bit about NatureCast now. We're going to be collaborating with NatureCast a little bit on conservation going forward. But Michael, this is an idea that you and your business partners came up with. Tell us, what are you guys doing and what are you guys hoping to achieve with the NatureCast brand?
Well, Evan, thanks for having us on the show. NatureCast is as much a platform for eco-activism as it is for entertainment. We are trying to reach that break between entertainment and awareness at the same time and mobilize our viewers to take action at the same time.
And what are going to be the issues? Now, today we're going to talk about reptiles, and we'll talk about that shortly, but tell us about what's going to be the key focus, or what's the most important thing, most important message for you guys at NatureCast to get across to South Africa and the rest of the continent?
I think to South Africa, the rest of the continent and the world. NatureCast hopes to cover stories on conservation, sustainability. We want to highlight all of the things that are currently going wrong in the world. You know, everything which we're doing to our environment cannot continue. We can't go forward in this tech age without adopting a green philosophy.
Matthew, let's talk about your take on conservation. Where do you think we are as human species in living with other species on the planet? Have we gone past the tipping point?
I think we're at the tipping point of being able to save species. We're in a critical age. We really need to be looking at ourselves as human beings in the way we view the environment. We often see ourselves as separate entities. We should be looking at each other as one entity, and then we can move forward. And by saving nature and the environment, we're actually inevitably saving ourselves as a species.
How do you make that connection for people, though, Michael? It seems as if we do a lot of talking about it, but the connection is just not being made. It's almost like we don't belong on this planet a little bit.
I'm gonna disagree with you there for a second, because I do think we belong on this planet. We do need to find a way for humans and nature, like Matthew says, to work together in unison, to actually go forward and make sure that even if we need to take a step back, we need to constantly be reminding ourselves that we are a part of nature, that we're not separate. We aren't separate entities, as Matthew said.
Matthew, now you've brought the reptiles for us today. Take them out there. I've got a couple of nervous crew members here. All the guys that are afraid of. What kind of snake is this? Firstly,
this is it's a coastal carpet python. He's from Australia, Queensland area.
Okay, he's around Brisbane.
Yes, yes,
okay.
Yes. He's a very, very calm and
relaxed
boy.
Wow, what a beautiful. What a beautiful, a carpet python.
Yes, coastal carpet python.
Wow, beautiful.
And he'll be just very interested as to what's going on.
Yeah, no, I can imagine.
He's very calm.
He looks very relaxed and very much in the frame. Wonderful, beautiful to see them up close like that.
Yes,
absolutely
indeed.
Stunning creature. Tell us a little bit about reptile conservation, because I do think it's something that maybe don't hit the headlines like some of the other species do, isn't it?
Of course. Well, I mean, in my life, I've always been very involved in reptiles and amphibians and things like that, kind of the less lovable creatures, you know?
Yes.
And through my life of having friends and family over and kind of trying to educate them about reptiles, the less lovable animals, especially the snakes. Like in South Africa, you know, culturally, snakes are a little bit taboo.
Yeah.
So I've always wanted to be able to get... If someone can learn to love a snake like this, then I think the rest of the animals will follow suit.
What do you feed this? Does it have a name? Is it a girl or a boy?
This is Bob. I call him Bob.
Bob? And what do you feed?
This is a boy. Bob eats usually between guinea pigs or rats, depending on what I have at the time.
Okay, but while at home at Joburg, we've got lots of rats.
Indeed.
It's an important thing to realize that without snakes, without sharks, the less lovable creatures, you are pulling something massive out of the ecological
food chain,
equilibrium.
Exactly
yeah. Tell us about the state of conserving our reptiles, Michael. You're in South Africa, and Matthew can maybe add to that. As you say, it's the less lovable creatures, but the impact is just as important, isn't it?
The impact is just as important, you know, from the smallest...
Just watch, Matthew, there are a couple of holes here. You might just slip in the holes. We've had an issue on the Generation set next door where they brought a snake in also for one of the episodes, and the snake went into one of the holes and got missing. Nobody wanted to work in that studio for the next week after that. Eventually they found the snake. So just make sure you don't get in.
I'll keep hold of him.
I think going back to your question, you know, we need to always remember that reptiles and birds, for example, are so similar that the one actually came from the other. We need to respect these animals. We need to know that they play a vital role in the ecosystem. You know, they are apex predators within their own realm, and they should be respected. So, you know, we do things like this because we're trying to educate, we're trying to get people to connect again, you know, as you said.
That's what I wanted to quickly touch on before we wrap it up. Education, that's what NatureCast is hoping to achieve with the work that you do. Tell us about the education, tell us about involving communities and getting people to understand the natural world a little better, maybe.
Oh, hello, boy. I think if you asked us what the most rewarding job that is that we worked on so far, it was going into the Makuleki community. And this is a community that lives right along the border of North Kruger. Now, everyone knows that these communities are either poaching or people are working in ecotourism, and they're actually embracing that going forward. So for us, it was such an amazing project to work on because we were able to go into the community. We were able to sit down with people and get their views. And what we hope to do is actually educate and try and get more people actually trained as guides going forward. I know that we'll have a show coming up more in the future where we explain a bit more about that, but it's definitely all about getting people to reconnect and getting people back to where they belong.
And getting vulnerable communities to interact with 100%. The natural world and also get to benefit from the natural world a little bit, because I suppose that's the only way we're going to really save our species. But in closing, Matthew?
Yes.
What would your message be to South Africans and people on the rest of the continent who often have misconceptions about reptiles? The serpent really is quite a wise creature, isn't it?
I would say they're very wise and very regal. You know, it's unfortunate that social media and kind of movies like Jaws and Anaconda kind of give you this innate fear of snakes and reptiles, where 90% of people have never had a negative experience with a reptile. It's purely an innate fear that kind of comes along. And out of all the snake species there are, I think only 20% are venomous, and out of those, only 5% can really hurt you or inflict any sort of death. But I think it's just, you know, the fear of the unknown and not knowing. So
absolutely.
By just educating yourself a little bit.
Bob's got his eye on me a little bit. Got your eye on me.
He does. And they can be scary, but they're also very, very sweet and intelligent animals and very much part of the natural world we live in.
I've got a lot of time for the serpent. It's the big hairy spiders that gives me a little bit of the creep. So I'm going to make sure that Michael don't bring any of those in there. What a beautiful snake.
Thank you.
I shouldn't. What a beautiful python you have here this morning. Gentlemen, thank you for coming in. I just want to point out to our viewers, of course, that Michael and the NatureCast team, they're going to be joining us periodically. I'm trying to twist his arm to come in every week and give us a little update as to what's happening anywhere in the world of conservation here in South Africa. NatureCast, that's the name you should be on the lookout for. They also do fantastic content that they're going to make available occasionally on the show and bring us issues. I think one of the next issues we're going to be talking about, Michael, is dealing with communities in the conservation world, in areas that are so often at risk. But thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having us, and I hope we can sit in this chair in 20, 30 years' time and be celebrating all the good things that we've done for the environment.
Fantastic. I hope so too, because it is in our hands, as the great Nelson Mandela said. We have to make sure that there's something left for, those that come after us. Now, that's where, on that Slytherin note this morning, we will say that, a couple of minutes, we'll take the news, the headlines at the top of the hour there. Bobby's going back into his box, as you can see. Good night, Bob. See you guys after the break.
Get all the latest news from the SABC's online news services on our website. Breaking news and in-depth coverage of everything from business, sports to politics and lifestyle. Catch the top news clips and watch live streaming of major news events on the SABC News YouTube channel whenever. Stay connected on the SABC News Facebook page and have your say on news that matters to you. And for the latest headlines and live updates from our reporters, follow us on Twitter. SABC Digital News, anytime, anywhere.
We're heading to a future of cars that will drive themselves and a place where robots will be doing some of our chores. But the challenge in Africa is to make sure that everyone is part of this new world.
To be behind with technology, it is a challenge for us as offenders.
There are many initiatives to ensure that Africans are truly connected.
We're now giving more access and internet to now the end users.
On Network, we have information on Africa's technology landscape, possibilities for the future, and some great African innovations. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time.
It's 1100 hours Central African time on this Wednesday, the 17th of February 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News Channel 404. You've just joined us. Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the final hour. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock, and you have to stay with us as we broadcast live from Auckland Park Studios, Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. We're also streaming live on YouTube. The entire show now available on our YouTube channel. Question of the day. We're asking you, can the latest round of student protests be justified? That's the question to you. Let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on our Facebook page. But first, let's take a look at your headlines. Overnight clashes between police and students at the University of Cape Town. And of course, remember that there will be a number of other issues that we'll cover in this hour. But Kendall, looking at the sports news, what can we expect?
Oh, it's quite a lot of information that we've got from last night's action, as well as some courtroom and boardroom action. But that's what we've got for you in the sport. In fact, I get ahead of myself. Good morning. We're going to be making sure that we bring you everything at about 11:30. Make sure you do not go anywhere. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we've got more news.
When pregnant with her first daughter, Relebogile knew that she wanted her daughter not to experience any identity issues. This is when she decided to look for toys that resembled Black as Beautiful.
I think for me it was also just to get our girls to have some sense of identity, somewhere, some sense of belonging.
I grew up having black and white dolls, and going to a multiracial school, I did not really see color. So for me, it's this thing of she should actually know what her true identity is.
Join your host, Boleng Molebadze, on Bophelong every Friday at 17:30.
I'm Peter Ndo.
And I'm Babakini Chetty Miller, SAB Miller, and Hauser Bush Imbev. It's something that I need to learn to say more often.
Will together produce around a third of the world's beer.
It is a mouthful.
Have you ever considered skin bleaching? Nigeria tops the list of African countries with 77% of its women bleaching their skin.
Now I can see that it is not good because it affects my face and some of my body parts.
Thousands of Arab Israelis and Palestinians participated in a big rally.
Flight MH17 was shot down by a Russian-made missile.
How those chips may fall is a prediction best left to the currency of time.
That's Primetime News, Africa Journal, and Your World on SABC News.
Overnight clashes between police and students at the University of Cape Town. The debate on President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address continues today. And the current UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has praised his late Egyptian predecessor Boutros Ghali. Now those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out now from Kendall what he will be presenting to us a little bit later. Very good morning.
Absolutely. I'm glad that we actually get to give everybody a bit of a teaser of what's happening in the sports later on. This is what's coming up at 11:30. In the UEFA Champions League, Edinson Cavani comes off the bench to score the winner against Chelsea.
He does get there and scores! A sensational substitution for Paris Saint-Germain.
It was a out-of-court settlement. This is my
and Chippa United chairman Chippa Benges clears the air around Rogers Kakani's court case. All this as Kenya's athletics head takes a special leave as an investigation gets underway into claims that he solicited bribes from athletes who failed drugs tests. 11:30, that's what you're getting. Be sure to be here.
Thank you, Kendall. You'll be back a little bit later. Top story this hour. Police and students clashed at the University of Cape Town last night. Police fired rubber bullets and stun grenades to disperse a group of students on the main campus. They were called in to help a private company demolish a shack erected by supporters of the Rhodes Must Fall movement. A number of people were arrested.
These were some of the scenes at the UCT lower campus. A jammy shuttle was set alight, including a car parked at the institution. Students also destroyed artwork from one of the buildings. Police say they were forced to take action when the protest turned violent.
The only reason I'm emotional is that this is what we have to do to get management to listen to us. If it means signing a paper to ensure insourcing or ensuring that students aren't homeless, this is what we have to do.
Police visited the university to tear down a shack erected by students after they failed to meet a 5 p.m. deadline to remove it. Attempts to form a human chain to prevent its dismantling unsuccessful. Protesters have complained about the lack of accommodation for black students. UCT management has condemned the protests. The institution's Elijah Molola says they will take steps against those responsible for the damage of its property. Police have opened cases of housebreaking and malicious damage to property. Vanessa Puna, SABC News, UCT, Cape Town.
Now, our reporter Kamal Lochrenberg is at the Wynberg Magistrates Court for charges of public violence and malicious damage to property brought against the students. Now, to give us an update, she joins us now from Cape. Very good morning to you, Kamal.
Yes, a very good morning to you, Elvis.
Now, just the latest on the students that was in court this morning.
Yes, Elvis. So this morning, 8 of the students who were arrested yesterday and have subsequently been suspended, they have appeared in court today. Now, 7 of the 8 students have been charged with malicious damage to property and public violence. And this is allegedly for stoning police vehicles and also for stoning police officers. Now, an 8th student has only been charged with damage to property, and that's apparently for stoning a security patrol vehicle and also for breaking its windows. What we've subsequently heard is that all 8 of these students have been granted bail. And Elvis, earlier today we saw leaders of the Rhodes Must Fall movement. They came into court and they will be posting bail for these 8 students.
Was there a number of other supported or student supporters for these students that was in court this morning from the university?
Usually, Elvis, there's usually a huge contingency of students outside. Now, when we arrived here this morning, it was very quiet outside. We did manage to speak to some of the leadership that have come through of the Rhodes Must Fall movement. But other than that, it's been relatively quiet inside. And we also do understand, according to our reporter inside, that it was relatively quiet in terms of numbers who have come out in support for these arrested students.
Now, you said you did speak to the student leaders. What are they saying? What is the main bone of contention here? Is it just about accommodation?
Currently, what we do understand, Elvis, is that it's still got to do a lot with a lot of accommodation. They have actually just gone back into court where they are posting bail, and they've said that they will come back out court to address it. Many of the issues is also that the fact that they've been suspended. They said some of them are still waiting for letters. They've heard down the grapevine that they have been suspended, and some of them said that they're still waiting to get confirmation if they have been suspended from the University of Cape Town.
How do they justify burning the photographs and the artwork at the university?
Elvis, what we do understand of some of the leadership that we have spoken to, they still maintain that the issue of what they deem as a lack of accommodation is a major issue for them. Many of them claim that they travel from far and they don't have any accommodation what they get to the university. But as the university said earlier while doing an earlier crossing, is that to cater for 27,000 students is quite a feat. What we do understand is that there is a meeting 11 o'clock at UCT with management of UCT, and I would assume that more of this type of information would come out.
Kamal, thank you so much for that update there. That's our reporter on the scene there, Kamal Lochrenberg, giving us the latest now. Moving over to Sona now, the debate on President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address continues today. The economy took centre stage yesterday with opposition parties weighing in on the current issues.
Opposition parties used their time to shred the government's plan of action as outlined by President Zuma.
We cannot respect a man personally responsible for the building of Nkandla and the firing of Nhlanhla.
What kind of a self-respecting country fails to produce food for itself despite the availability of arable land? More than 10 million workers who wake up every day to sell their labor, they do not get any living wage.
For the UDM, a request for the president to do the right thing.
Give us a mandate, Msholos, to handle your exit in a dignified manner. Further, and to avoid another embarrassing sitting president scoring own goals.
Focusing on the sluggish economy, the ruling party says it's committed to providing incentives to attract investments in various industries, and the implementation of the 9-point plan and industrialization policy will go full steam ahead.
I'm happy to indicate that we already have pledges of over 30 billion rand from institutions like the Land Bank, the Industrial Development Corporation.
I remember that even when I sat in cabinet some 10 years ago, we were constantly being asked to bail out the South African Airways. Why are we still doing it? Too often it comes down to poor policy decisions.
He made a serious error when he appointed Van Rooyen as a Minister of Finance to appease the Guptas, and in doing so, wiped out almost 700 billion rand of wealth in South Africa. The president remained silent.
Bulelani Philip, SABC News, Parliament.
Well, remember that we're asking you a very important question today, and that relates to the students, as you heard, they're burning down the artwork and complaining about accommodation. And we're asking you that question today. What do you make of the latest protest by the students? Let us know what's on your mind on the hashtag, well, not hashtag, on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. You can also like us on the Facebook page. And of course, you can post your comments. Can the latest round of student protests really be justified? That's our question to you. Let's now move on. The two-day Africa Energy Indaba held in Sandton ends today. The conference and exhibition show provides an excellent opportunity for businesses to showcase their products and services to decision makers and influencers from the power and electricity industry in the region and as well as the continent. SABC reporter Dia Boseto now joins us from the Energy Indaba with her guest, Victor Polikarpov, who is the Regional Vice President of Sub-Saharan Africa, Rosatom. Diabo, very good morning to you. First and foremost, before you speak to your guest, what is the latest at the Energy Indaba?
Good morning, Elvis. Well, today, as you said in your intro, is the second and last day of the Africa Energy Indaba. There are a number of meetings that are happening upstairs at conferences, but the most important one perhaps today for myself, I could say, is the talk with regards to nuclear energy. Well, remember that last week during the State of the Nation address, the President spoke about the plans for the country to get nuclear energy, and that they will be done at a pace that South Africa or the country, the fiscus, can afford. I managed to get hold of a representative from one of the nuclear companies that's in Russia and Rosatom. It is Mr. Victor Polikarpov. I hope I got that right. Victor, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. And he's trying his hand in Zulu, saying Sanbonani. Well, Victor, I'll cut to the chase. You are one of the companies that has been touted and is very familiar in the news with regards to being the firm favorite for South Africa to build nuclear energy. What is the latest with regards to that bidding? Are you still in the running for that?
We're still in the running for that. Now we're in the bidding process. The government has issued the procurement process, the URI, but the fact that it hasn't started yet. We're looking for the launch of the RFP from the government, and we'll definitely respond to the RFP.
And of course, there's a lot of people who speak about the fact that your country, Russia, is the forerunner-up and is the favorite. Can you confirm that for us?
No, I can't confirm that because all these rumors and speculations have started when the first intergovernmental agreement was signed in 2014. We were the first. Our agreement was the most comprehensive, but after that, 5 vendor countries signed a similar agreements. If you have a look at them, you'll find a lot of similarity in that.
You have 29 nuclear reactors in various stages running. Why should South Africa look to Russia to have, or to Rosatom to have the nuclear build done by yourselves?
Well, first off, we are one of the biggest state atomic energy corporations and one of the biggest vendor countries. We're number 1 in nuclear power plant constructions currently. Having the backlog of 43 nuclear power plants built, nuclear reactors built throughout the world. 9 are currently built in Russia. The rest are built in other parts of the world, especially in Southeast Asia. We are talking to a number of African countries as well, and we are most referenced as far as technology is concerned. Our technology is more than 50 years old, and we have more than 1,400 years of reactor years of operation.
Well, it looks like you are quite advanced. You must come at a very high cost. There's a cost running around in circles here in South Africa, about 1 trillion rand or so, however much. At what cost does South Africa get nuclear build from Russia?
So it's a bit premature to talk about the cost because we have to respond to the final to the request of the proposal. Because it's yesterday during our session on nuclear, we spoke about the program and the cost, comparing it with buying a car. You don't know which car you are going to buy yet, and we don't know which car South Africa is, either Mercedes or any other car, If South Africa prefers a Mercedes, well, the cost will be, structured accordingly. But what I can say that the rate of exchange of a ruble to a dollar is quite favorable today for South Africa, and I think that we are, from the financial point of view, we can offer one of the best propositions today.
Victor, thank you very much for your time. Unfortunately, I'm out of time, but thank you very much for giving us that insight. Well, thank you very much to Victor. He's given us the latest insight with regards to the nuclear build and why South Africa should choose Russia. But I'm going to have to take it back to the studio, and it's back to you, Elvis.
Nazdarovia, the Diablo Seto in Santon with Mr. Polikarpov in studio. Now with that, it's over to Evan with your regular regional slot.
Yeah, Elvis, I was a military man myself at some time, and I can tell you the armed forces of South Africa, they've invaded Port Elizabeth this week. Now, during the next couple of days, the combined armed forces will be displaying their various capabilities in the lead up to Armed Forces Day this coming Sunday. Now, in 2012, the President proclaimed the 21st of February as Armed Forces Day. It's a day that South Africans honor the men and women in uniform entrusted with the responsibility of defending the country and to protect the country's population. Now, our intrepid reporter, Janine Lee, is at one of the display areas at Kings Beach in Port Elizabeth to tell us a little bit about the events that are taking place there. I can tell you she's with Lieutenant General Norman Yangani, who's the Chief of Staff Human Resources with the Department of Defense here in South Africa. But Janine, before you do the interview, there's a lot of military hardware around in PE today, isn't there? Well, it looks as if we're having a little bit of difficulty with Janine at the moment. Of course, Armed Forces Day will coincide with, well, culminate on Sunday in a massive air show over the entire Nelson Mandela Bay. It's going to be one of the great shows. Let's hope we can get back to Janine so she can tell us a little bit more. We all love her country. Janine, are you back with us?
Yes, I'm back with you.
We lost you there for a minute, my dear. I know you've got Lieutenant General Norman Ngeni here with us, but PE must be a hive of excitement because of our Armed Forces Week.
Absolutely. It's extremely full at the moment, and yeah, the Port Elizabeth people are absolutely loving it.
Now, Janine, the whole week culminates on Sunday with a big air show. Is that right?
That's correct. It's actually by the Navy, by the Army, by the Air Force. But what I have to tell you is where we are here today at King's Beach, there is the most amazing demonstration by all the armed forces. It's a park, almost a theme park, and the people of Port Elizabeth have come out in their numbers to look what's on offer. And who knows, maybe take up a career in the Defence Force. We never know. We could be looking around. I might be looking at the new general or the new...
Well, unfortunately, we've lost that link. That really makes me sad. I really wanted to see the pictures coming out of Armed Forces Week, but we're going to be there a couple of times still this week. It runs until Sunday. You'll be able to see all the latest military equipment that we have. Now, moving on, there's still no academic activities on the Mahikeng campus of the Northwest University following students' violent protests there. Management has launched an investigation into acts of vandalism and arson. Both the EFF Student Command and SASCO have denied any involvement in the disruption of lectures and vandalism of university property.
The demand for insourcing and the registration of students with outstanding debt marred by acts of violence. University property vandalized and torched, much to the frustration of some students.
I'm just so frustrated because I have assignments to do and I had to attend psychology this morning, and it's sad that we cannot really go into class and do anything productive. It's my first year and this really, really is frustrating.
But student leadership has denied culpability.
We don't need to burn buildings, we don't need to destroy buildings to get the message across. All we need to do is to sit down at the table of discussion and debate this thing.
It's not SASCO that has initiated this disruption. In fact, SASCO is calling that all students must go to classes with immediate effect because we are agents of accessing institutions of higher learning.
The university has appealed for calm, urging both parties to help bring stability to the institution.
Well, currently we're investigating whether the responsible group is EFF Student Command supporters or SASCO supporters.
The 4 arrested suspects will appear in court on charges of arson. Selwa Tatai, SABC News, Mahikeng.
Now, I can give you the latest, and that is that academic activities have now resumed at the Mahikeng campus of the Northwest University. This following a couple of days of violent protests. The campus came to a halt earlier this week following protests over outsourcing and registration of students with outstanding fees. A security vehicle, as you saw, was torched and a bursary office was also set alight. The violence broke out when some students demanded the reinstatement of suspended SRC President Benz Mabengwane, who at the time was attending a disciplinary hearing. He is amongst other accused of violating a court interdict and hampering with registration there. Now, on the latest spate of student protests at the university, we're joined by Selwa Tatai in our Mahikeng studio. Very good morning, Selwa. Nice to talk to you again.
Good morning, Evan.
Selwa, just give us a quick update. We've got a report that academic activities have now resumed. Is that accurate?
Yes, indeed. Academic activities are in full swing. This follows 2 days of violent protest, as you pointed out in the introduction. Now, the bone of contention here, Eben, is that students want those with outstanding balances to be registered, and they've also taken an issue with the university reneging from their initial stance of engaging them on the issue of outsourcing. You'll remember that it is not only this university which is against the outsourcing of some staff members at the university. There was a similar cases at the University of Wits, TUT, and many other campuses across the country.
Selo, it's one thing to resume academic activities, but would you say the campus is a place that is conducive for education and constructive education at that?
Well, that determination can be made as academic activities continue this week. But what we have seen is campus management intensifying security, and also a heavy police contingent has been deployed at the Battle campus to see to it that there is a smooth running of academic activities, including administrative affairs. You'll remember that the issue of registration of students with outstanding debt has not been resolved, and there is a process to address that. At least that is what the management has told us, in that there will be interviews where students will be evaluated as to whether they are academically deserving and financially deserving, and that process has not been fully exhausted. So those are some of the things that have the university is dealing with, and they have been hampered by what we have seen in the past 2 days. And also the university has made some damning allegations against the EFF Student Command, blaming them for what has transpired over the past 2 days. But we've been getting conflicting reports. Yesterday, when we spoke to the Vice-Chancellor of the university, he confirmed that it was EFF Student Command supporters and members who were leading the charge in rendering the university ungovernable. But, you know, the spokesperson of the university told us something different, saying that they cannot say with certainty whether it was EFF student members and supporters who were leading this violent protest.
And what's the status at the moment of the SRC President, Benz Mabengwan?
Well, what we have managed to get from the university management is that his fate will be decided on Monday. The disciplinary processes has been exhausted, and what we can see now unfolding on Monday is to whether he will be reinstated as the president or not. But some of the people that we have spoken to, they've told us that odds are stacked against him, and they don't see him coming back. But of interest again is that some of the people that we have spoken to, they've told us that there's been a systematic way of dealing with student leaders at this campus, citing that Mabengwane's case is not the thing, in a sense, in that in the previous years there has been leaders, student leaders at the campus who have been suspended dating back to as far as 2008. I can count 4 to 5 SRC presidents who have suffered a similar fate, and saying that to a large extent the university management seems to be ruling with an iron fist. We posed that question to the Vice-Chancellor yesterday when we had an interview with him, and he told us that there is nothing like that. Instead, these SRC presidents, they have been violating policies of the university, particularly with regards to how student affairs are run and how the CRC should be governed.
And the latest damage that we see, there's a lot of torched vehicles, other damage caused around the university. What's the estimate of the damage of the property that's been incurred so far?
Well, Abel, we have the university rather has not been able to establish the costs of the damage. But what some students are saying is that it seems like it is now having a dent on their demands and their protest in giving academically deserving students and who are in financial need an opportunity to continue with their studies. You'll remember that the university from previous years has incurred student debts of over 117 million rand, and they went on record to say that they will need 91 million rand to see to it that they give an opportunity to those academically deserving students yet financially needy. So we don't know yet as to whether money has been trickling in, because as you know, there is an NW Fund, NW MAF campaign which is aimed at fundraising for those poor needy students, and also how far has NFSAS went into funding for this shortfall.
Selo, and in conclusion, what are the universities saying? How are they going to deal with these types of crises that continually pop up going forward now?
Well, we don't know, and that's an interesting question, because from 2008, when I started covering this protest at the university, it seems like the only bone of contention here, particularly from student leaders, is the issue of funding. For 10 years now, even not for 8 years now, the issue of funding has popped out over a number of years, and it seems like the university has no solution to it, or rather maybe the Department of Higher Education has no solution to it, and this university, unfortunately, students are at the receiving end of lack of funding.
Selo, thank you very much for giving us a comprehensive report on, well, the latest news coming out of the crisis at the Northwest University. That is the Mahikeng campus. Now we can tell you, of course, that matters have resumed. Education has resumed. Matters are back to normal. Before we take a break, let's just take a quick look at what you've been talking about on social media. These are live tweets that have been coming in. Ethel Pullen says to us, at SABC Newsroom, vandalism and criminal acts can never be justified. That's with regards to what's been going on in Cape Town. In Cape Town, of course, we've asked you the question. Send us your tweets there. Time for us to take a break now. When we come back, Kendall will give us a complete sports roundup, so don't go away.
Get all the latest news from the SABC's online news services on our website. Breaking news and in-depth coverage of everything from business, sports to politics and lifestyle. Catch the top news clips and watch live streaming of major news events on the SABC News YouTube channel whenever. Stay connected on the SABC News Facebook page and have your say on news that matters to you. And for the latest headlines and live updates from our reporters, follow us on Twitter. SABC Digital News, anytime, anywhere.
Ahika Mano produces abstract and symbolic works of art. He called his latest collection Vote with Ink, Not Blood.
Praying for peace, literally, in my own way.
The South African film titled Luister or Listen in Afrikaans tackles issues of race in the country.
I think that the end goal is the reformation of institutional culture, but how we get there is in fact through changing the language policy so that no student is forced to learn in Afrikaans.
It's fashion designers like Julia Mpoko who are starting to pay more attention to menswear and hope to make a mark in the fashion industry.
So regardless of whether you're African, European, there's certain styles that you like. So if an African man enjoys wearing simple, well-tailored pants, then yes, I guess.
Join Refulo Mula for that 1 hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends.
Good morning and welcome back. I'm Kendall Makhamate and I've got your sports news on Newsroom. Now, top story is from the continent. The turmoil in Kenyan athletics continues. Athletics Kenya's chief executive has asked for 21 days leave pending an investigation into bribery allegations. It's alleged that Isaac Mwangi asked for money to reduce the doping bans of 2 suspended Kenyan athletes.
Kenya has long been regarded as the global frontrunner in distance running.
And at the 2015 World Championships in Beijing, the country topped the medals table with 7 gold medals. But Kenya has been rocked by doping and corruption scandals recently, and last week 2 banned athletes, Joy Sakari and Koki Manunga, accused Mwangi of seeking around 450,000 rand each to reduce their 4-year bans. Mwangi immediately denied the claims.
Our rules do not allow doping, and anyone caught doping, there is no way out. We'll expose you, we will kick you out of our competition, and will not allow anyone to taint the good name that this country has always had.
Athletics Kenya has since confirmed that its newly formed anti-doping agency of Kenya will investigate the allegations against Mwangi.
We would like to finish this thing as fast as possible, with, of course, looking at the individual rights of everybody. We would like to see that the sport is protected by all means.
ADAC is expected to report its findings in 2 weeks. But the spike in doping and recent corruption allegations against top AK officials continue to stoke fears in the country that they could follow Russia and be suspended from global athletics. Liesl Zankel, SABC News.
Now to on-field news, where Paris Saint-Germain and Benfica will go into the second leg having an advantage after winning the first leg of the UEFA Champions League last 16 ties last night. Now Zenit looks set to hold on for a goalless draw when Domenico Criscito conceded a late foul, earning his second booking in the process.
Second yellow. He's off here in the last minute of the game.
Then from the ensuing free kick, Jonas rose to head in the only goal of this UEFA Champions League last 16, first leg.
Or is it? No! It's a goal! Right at the death! Well, would you believe it?
Benfica will take a narrow lead to Russia in 3 weeks' time. Meanwhile, Edinson Cavani came off the bench to give Paris Saint-Germain victory after Jean-Obi Mikel had deflected in Zlatan Ibrahimovic's free kick.
1-0 PSG.
Jean-Obi Mikel levelled the matters on the stroke of half-time.
And it's Mikel, of all people.
Ibrahimovic. Cavani then gave Paris Saint-Germain the edge.
And, Cavani does get there and scores! A sensational substitution for Paris Saint-Germain.
Wednesday night sees Jean take on Wolfsburg and Roma host Real Madrid. Now, there's been some sort of ruckus going on in the PSL side Chippa United's house. Their former head coach, Roger Skakani, has been embroiled in a court case because he was put on special leave since the 7th of December after being accused of allegedly reporting for duty, smelling of alcohol at the Nelson Mandela commemoration match in Mthatha. Chairman of the club, Chippa Mpengesi, claimed that they've settled out of court.
It was an out-of-court settlement. This is my proposal because now the team is doing well. You know, we don't want to focus on the negativity, negative stuff. The allegations were brought before me. As a chairman, I had to act. But I've decided, no, look, at the end of the day, let me not act, you know, because let me focus on building this team. Because Chippa United is not a political party. It is a football team where people, our supporters, they want to enjoy winning, you know, seeing us winning, getting those goals, beating those clubs. So I've took a decision to say I'm not going to fight Skakani, even though he went to Labour Court, despise or undermine the PSL, you know. But so today we just made a settlement out of court. Even though I was disappointed when I look at other media sources saying Chippa United has lost the case, there was never a case today. It was just an out-of-court settlement.
Now, the almighty tussle between South Africa's Proteas and the touring English cricket side is even Stevens, with the English taking the Test series and the hosts taking the ODI series. Up next is the T20s, but before that, cricket analyst Kolele Sotelero gave the SABC some thoughts on the English tour so far.
It all boils down to one thing, and it's a matter of selection. What really tempered with South Africa's proceedings in that Test series was the selection process, and we do understand it's a new selection panels, new convening of selectors, and excuse me, and the whole captaincy thing midway through the series. So there was a lot of uncertainty in the team. But there were some stand-up performances, particularly from the younger guys. The two that I speak of, Kagiso Rabada and Themba Bavuma, those two just showed that they have arrived in Test cricket and they're here to stay. And people speak of the 100 that Themba Bavuma scored in Newlands in the US Test, and they forget the position that South Africa is in. And I think they were 180, 160 odd behind, where they needed to score runs and runs quickly. And Themba Bavuma showed his ability and his capability to bat in the middle of the batting order. But if you look at other players like JP Duminy, Faf du Plessis, you know, for me, when AB de Villiers took it upon himself to keep wicket, it then said to me that it was an opportunity for Faf du Plessis and JP Duminy to be afforded roles in the team for those first two test matches. Whoever doesn't score, AB will drop the gloves, Quinton comes back. And
interesting one with that one, because Quinton did come back. Now
he had to. He was scoring runs every single day.
We've got the Australians coming up, but most importantly, we've got the T20 coming up. And when your man like JP also comes in as your all-rounder with that ball in hand, are we in a tough space?
Look, that tour to India played a huge role psychologically in some of the players. Those conditions that they played in India, some of the players may have lost some confidence. And JP, we know he struggles with spin. He's been struggling now with Adil Rashid and Moeen Ali. But when you look at Test cricket and ODI cricket separately, in Test cricket, if your technique is not up to standard, you'll be found wanting and you will struggle. And we saw that in Stian van Zyl. We know in domestic cricket he scores runs. He's been scoring runs for the past 3-4 seasons. Dane Villas again. It was unfortunate for him that he made his debut in subcontinent conditions. But even then, he didn't look the part. But if you look at Themba Bavuma, who was given the opportunity, even up the order to open the batting, we at least saw that he could stick around, you know, he could play spin on merit and he could play the bad balls. But if you look at T20, you look at a player who's out of form, you bring him to the team, he faces 2 overs, he scores you a quick 20 off 8 balls, then you say, yeah, well, maybe we'll go for him at the moment. But looking at the one-day series, what was interesting now for me, at the Bullring, Chris Morris scores 50. You go to Cape Town, David Visser scores 41. So now that's a position that Cricket South Africa wants at the moment, where players are scoring runs and the right players are scoring runs. Because the reason why I say right players, it's those all-rounders that have been missing since the departure of Jacques Kallis. And we, for a very long time, have been praying, and I mean praying, so that a guy like Farhan Biadin comes to the party with ball and bat. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened for Cricket South Africa. He himself has been found wanting. Nothing to take away from the player. We know he can do it in domestic cricket, ram slam, momentum, but when it comes to the Proteas...
It was also good as far as the bowling lineup is concerned, because again, I mentioned the fact that, you know, the Dale wasn't there, but it was good to see Imran come in and take wickets as well, especially at Newlands. At Newlands, I mean, he did a great job. You know, it's always one to go to. It does break those partnerships. It does deliver when you need him to. But the question is, you know, can we be that lax when it comes to T20s?
A player like Imran Tahir runs on confidence. So if his confidence is low, then he'll be throwing those full tosses, those half volleys outside of stump, and he'll be found at the boundary ropes. Unfortunately for him, the first 2 to 3 ODIs, he was absent, even though he was picked in the team, but he couldn't find his lengths, and his adjustments weren't correct. And fortunately for him, he came right, and he picked up 3 wickets at the Wanderers, and he came back again at Newlands, and he picked up crucial wickets of Joe Root, trying to sweep him down fine leg, and that changed the match, you know. But you can't ride on that. You can't pick players on the ability of them finding confidence.
Right, moving on to other sporting news. Luxembourg's Bobby Jungels won the 145-kilometer first stage for new team Ethics Quickstep at the Tour of Oman. South African Team Dimension Data's Serge Povels finished in second place, while Edvald Boasson-Hagen is in fourth. Jungels launched his solo attack with just 2 kilometers remaining from a group that had formed after 2 late climbs. He crossed the finish line in 3 hours, 37 minutes and 33 seconds, with Belgium's Povels 6 seconds back. Frenchman Romain Bardet clinched third place. With bonus seconds on offer for the top 3, Jungels now leads the race by 10 seconds overall from Povels. Today's 162-kilometer second stage includes an uphill that rises above 200 meters in the final 3 kilometers. That's where we leave it with the sport. Up next, we have a look at the weather with Philip Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, starting off with your weather, we're going to start off again, of course, with what's been going on in terms of your cloud cover. And, of course, you can see some cloud cover, a lot of mid-level cloud cover, really, over the northern parts of Central Africa. Really cloud cover, though, concentrated over the southern parts of Central Africa, down the western coastlines around the Namibian region there, and then in towards South Africa. We're still seeing that dense band of cloud cover moving across the North African region here. West African regions expecting that as a result of lower pressure systems, and you can see that acting on the region, the cloud cover just coming through that entire area there. Lower pressure systems also acting throughout Central Africa for today to bring in a little bit of rainfall. Moving into this afternoon, it intensifies, especially through the interior there around Zambia's northeastern regions. Now, as we can see, as we move into a little bit more detailed forecast, we're seeing some slightly lower temperatures in South Africa than we were yesterday, so very, very good news for many areas. Pretoria peaking slightly cooler than yesterday at only 36 degrees for today. I do say only, but of course that is still going to be a hot day. Isolated to scattered showers forecast throughout almost the entire southern African region here. But moving further north, that's going to continue in some areas, but dry up in others. As you can see, Dar es Salaam even receiving some rain for today, a 33-degree maximum there, but just further north there around Kilimanjaro, Mombasa, neither of these areas expecting any rainfall whatsoever. Now, of course, we did say we're expecting a fair amount of rainfall around Lilongwe and the surrounding areas, so do expect that later this afternoon. 27-degree maximums forecast for you this afternoon as well, with some cloud cover coming in towards Mogadishu, Juba, Addis Ababa, all expecting that cloud cover, but of course Addis Ababa, one of the cooler regions, they're peaking at a mild 23-degree maximum. Now, moving north into the Middle Eastern region here, we're still seeing cooler temperatures in Tehran at only 11 degrees. Cairo peaking even warmer than yesterday at 32 now, a full 3 degrees warmer than yesterday's 29-degree maximum. So temperatures definitely coming up quickly in Cairo. We're going to see that all changing, though, as we look towards the western coastlines there. Behind the frontal system, we're seeing some fairly chilly temperatures. Rabat peaking at 14, as is Algiers, 16 for Tunis, and temperatures rising, of course, as we move ahead of that frontal system towards Benghazi at 27 degrees. Now, no rainfall forecast for that area at the moment, and almost no rainfall as well throughout the rest of West Africa, at least for the major cities anyway. Taking a look towards Bamako, we're seeing some very warm temperatures there, 37-degree highs. Along the southern coastline of West Africa, seeing some warm temperatures too, 30 to 32-degree maximums. Quickly towards West Africa's, or rather Central Africa's western regions here, seeing a lot of rainfall. Kinshasa peaking at 37 degrees and a hot 39-degree maximum for Bangui. That's where I leave your weather for now. Do stay tuned.
Well, that's all we have for you for today here on Newsroom. We hope that you will be back with us tomorrow morning, same time, same place. But from me, Elvis Preslin.
And me, Kendo Makhamate.
We'll see you tomorrow morning, same time, same place. Ciao for now. Arrivederci.